Welcome everyone to the Finance Commission meeting of Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. Our first order of business is approval of minutes from our meeting of last Thursday, March 13th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. Is there a second by Eric? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, thank you. Next order of business is the general government budget. Jeff, can you walk us through what information you've provided us?
So what you should have is the summary of the budget, the UMIS, which is the details by entity. You will have the general government total, well actually you'll have the whole budget, which is a larger pack. Piece of information is the general government descending order for the largest increase. And then
Ah,
there's the
I was trying to figure out what the system
order
was there.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you
So-
repeat that? I couldn't hear.
So it's the general government salaries.
This one?
Yeah.
Salaries, Yep. Sorted in descending order from the largest increase year over year.
Dollar increase, okay, yeah.
And then you have the same for the general government expenditures, sorted the same way.
Got it,
So
okay.
it kind of gave you a little bit more ease
Oh,
of
okay.
reading to identify the major
Thank you.
impacts on the budget.
It should be,
Got it,
And
okay.
then services, which is done the same way, it's the other third document. Just kind of a way I put it together to look at, okay, what are the major drivers, what are the major categories? Instead of looking through 400 lines and trying to identify.
Got it, okay. And the backside of this is just continuation of expenditures?
Yeah, so that's on the expenditures again, so we did go over that in the past, but it was kind of identifying the large expenditures within the general fund.
Mm-hmm,
Basically saying most of them were contractual. There's very little kind of, what is it, 40, I don't remember what it was. So $46,000 of remaining increase in expenses that aren't really contractual.
okay,
So there's not a lot of play, there's not a lot of fudge in the numbers in terms of looking at the increases.
okay,
Like I said,
all right.
Okay.
okay. So, there's a lot of information to cover here. Will of the committee, how would we like to go about this?
We have some staff here, why don't we try to take care of their budgets, get them out of the way, and maybe go on to other stuff.
I'm going to go through the slide deck
You
that we
got
have.
first?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Our traditional, as you know, some of them are small and quick, but
Yeah.
at least we can go through it.
Did you share this with us?
I sent it down, I'm sending it, and you guys will have it when you get home this afternoon. We did it.
Okay.
There's really very little there other than just the standard sort of department. And I'll see if my clicker will actually work. Let's try, excuse me, 1 second. This. Just a moment. The clicker's actually working. So this is actually just what was presented to the board a few weeks ago, so there's really no changes from there. Deb, can you minimize that a little bit just so we can,
That's not what's showing up on my screen.
oh,
See, all kinds of different things.
let's do this on this. Sorry, everyone. What's that? Yeah, it's not bad, it's showing, why it's showing market side there. No, it's not very important. It's not a good thing, it doesn't have. So anyway, total general fund budget for, general government, we're coming in at 43,187,000. Because everyone knows salaries are always the biggest driver for the budget. Top expenses, of course, trash, IT as a whole, snow and ice still hovering around $900,000. We think we'll be good for snow and ice this year, but we came very close,
Very close, yeah,
Um,
we'll be fine.
but just sort of a hair under. Operating capital budget's very low, and we have reduced road construction, unfortunately, to get the budget to balance.
But chapter 90 has increased, right?
It has, it looks like it's gonna go up about $200,000. They're not passing that additional increase through the traditional formula. So normally the chapter 90 formula includes road mileage, employment, and a couple other items. The additional $100 million that the governor has proposed, and I think the legislature still has to vote on it, is not going through that formula. They've created another separate formula to distribute that from. Not as good for
Yeah,
us.
it's gonna be based on road miles only.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
And they're making some adjustments for rural communities, which is great for rural communities, but not us. Had it gone through the traditional formula, it would have been about $450,000 additional, so not the end of the world, but at least it's something. Chapter 90 hasn't increased in probably 20 years. It gets adjusted every time the census comes around for the employment piece of it, which is a component, but, so it's helpful, but not.
How much of the reduction in the roads budget is, how much is that going to affect? Like how, you had a plan, right, what was it, a 10-year plan that
Yeah.
you all had, so how much is it gonna split down?
Well, it's, so if you look at, call it a road is about $100,000 for a smaller residential, or a full road reconstruction is $1 million a mile. So it's gonna shave a couple of roads off. We know that from a capital planning perspective, now that we're ending our 5-year road program. At some point, the larger roads in town are gonna have to come forward as capital projects. Somewhat related to this, but even if they weren't, if you look at Washington Street, which reasonably needs to get done every, call it 10 years because of the size and scope of it, that's a couple $1 million. So if we were to take that just out of chapter 90 money, you're looking at probably 3 years of chapter 90 money to do just Washington Street. So 30% of our road work in a year would be taken up by just Washington Street, and then add on a Manhattan or a Ponset or another long street. Those $1.5 million, $2 million roads, all of a sudden we're doing roads every other year, depending on how you want to. Roads as capital projects, even really just Washington Street as they come up. Over the course of time, that'll let us roughly keep what we have, keeping pace with where we are. But I think this year with chapter 90 and the budget allocation, we're at maybe 1.3 million total. It's been close to 1.7 million, so the number is coming down.
Just as an aside, none of those roads are on the capital outlay plan as we speak now, the 5-year outlay.
Yeah, Washington is probably 5 to 6 years out. It's been done in the last 5 to 6 years, but, and Neponset is in reasonably good shape, so that won't be
That
for
was
a
just
while.
done.
But, you know, within every 10-year cycle, roughly, you're gonna have one of those major roads come up that just eat up 3 to 4 years worth of road money. Oops, sorry. Health insurance, as everyone knows, go back, sorry, is a killer. That 10.5% number, that's Norwood, that's highlighted there in blue. If anything, it's coming in a bit higher than that. The GIC did something a little strange this year. They normally tell us their meeting ahead of time, they tell us what that rate is going to be, and then they set the rate at roughly what they said it was gonna be, or they'll come in a fraction of a point higher or lower. This year, they set that meeting, told us the increase, did nothing at that meeting, set another meeting for a few weeks later, and then went up a little bit above 10.5%. But as we've said, that 10.5% increase is roughly $2 million. That's almost our entire levy increase for a year.
Yeah,
Now we think it's 13.
Closer to that, yeah. We've got to do a final audit of it, but
yeah,
it's just
so it's gonna be more than this.
more than 10 after.
Right.
We might come in around that number based on our plan enrollment, but it's not good.
Okay, well, which plan is the MIIA?
So that's Maya, that's the same insurance company, that's the MMA. We get our property and casualty through Maya.
Okay.
They're up, as you can see, 15.5, I think is what they told their members. Again, slight difference there. Some towns, these are just their budgeted numbers, they're not matching up with what the reality actually is. Like, I don't know how Medfield is only budgeting 10%, but they're up 17%.
Okay.
We're not alone in this. The GIC is up, of course, the GIC is the entire Commonwealth, so all 40,000 state employees plus 50 or 60 cities and towns. Nobody's doing well. Couple of the uninsured, uninsured, I wish. Couple of the self-insured towns are doing a little bit better, but some of them are not. But they maintain their own fund balances. They have a little bit more control over their plan design than we do with the GIC. When we went to the GIC, like a lot of cities and towns, we saved a significant amount of money. You give up, by being in a larger pool, you give up some control over your local changes. I occasionally get asked the question, have we looked at other options for health insurance? Are there other things we could do? Unfortunately, our risk, our loss ratio always puts us well above our contribution, so arguably we're being offset by the rest of the state, which is not a bad thing, but nobody will even come near us if our loss ratio is exceeding the total amount we're paying in. We'd like to look at down the road whether we can do a health insurance buyout option to try to start getting employees off our insurance to see if that might help us eventually lower the size of our pool. We've got to try to do something, but you know, when we're between employee and employer paying in 22, 23 million, and then our losses are at 24 million, nobody's going to touch us. So,
How would we get down close to 10% of the actual
so
rate increase is 13%? I mean, I know people can choose different plans, but what's been the history of that?
So it varies by a couple points either way. So it's either people are choosing different plans. The GIC also doesn't go up 13%, their plan rates go up by different amounts. We have to look at that based on what our enrollment is. And then looking at our general enrollment change as well. Did we have 10 people jump on in the middle of the year? Did we have 10 people jump off? Or we can say, hey, this is great, we had 10 family plans jump off. We think we'll be good. Did 10 jump on, and in which case we're worse.
Any idea why Medway is such an outlier? Doesn't matter what kind of plan you have, whether it's self-insured or GIC, whatever, they're just, people won't get sick in Medway or what?
Apparently not. I will see their manager tomorrow, and I'll ask them why they're in such
okay.
great shape.
Being on the FinCom there for 14 years, I can tell you that's relatively new that they went to self-insured. There were a number of years the pain was just like we're seeing here.
Okay,
But again, to get a good self-insured program, you're gonna have to put a nice balance in there. to
yeah, and
cover
sometimes
diverse
it works
costs.
for you, and
Yeah.
sometimes it
So
doesn't.
they've had a very significant turnover of employees, and
Mhm.
I assume that ties into claims. Obviously,
Yeah.
not seeing that, but
Yeah.
it seems that that's the
Okay,
play.
seems like the last 2 years, they've just been an outlier.
Yeah, and again, our loss ratio, we pull it every 2 years, it's just not good.
Yeah.
So even trying to look at going self-insured down the road, I'd
Yeah.
love to do the analysis, but we'd have to start off with $26 million in the budget to get it kicked off, and I just don't
Yeah.
think it's gonna work long-term.
Yep.
Operating budget summary, before we go to the department heads. This just breaks it down by salary, operating, and capital for overall. So a little bit higher on the salary side, a little bit lower on the operating side, but still coming in around that 5.4% total increase. The capital number, we don't really look at as a capital number, because it's mostly road work and a couple other items.
Where do you see 5.4% total increase?
So that number is just the sum of those. I don't know where it's 5.1.
That's, when we made the last changes, we had to bring down a little bit more.
Did it drop the whole amount to 5.1?
Yeah.
8, I thought we were still at 5.3, but I was counting on an extra 0.12%. So we're gonna go through these budgets. You have the budget line item. We can either pause at each department budget, or if you'd like, we can just circle back into the end, because some of the smaller town hall departments tend to go quickly. Selectmen's office, no major changes here. We did a year and a half ago go down one full-time staff person in this department. Other than that, it's mostly salary and COLA changes.
I know this is I'm just gonna ask this question.
Go for it. That's what we're here for.
There was no change in operating expense. So I know you've got to hold the budget somewhere. Are we looking at that in reality compared to what's happening this year? I guess that's where we don't see what's actually happening in '25, so I can look back to '24, but I know years to years change.
Sure, it depends on the budget in the office. The selectman's office is a fairly small operating budget. It's really some paper that they push, they gotta get their licenses out, they do some office supplies. Those are things, if you had to, you could borrow from another office if you did. They don't have a lot of costs that are commodity-like costs that are likely to skyrocket or go through the roof. There's some other areas where you see we get a little bit more cautious, but for a smaller office, the manager's office, the selectman's office, it's not likely to change as much. Again, it's a one-person office supporting the board of 5.
Right.
There's not a lot that can go wrong there. Some of the other departments, as we get to them, you'll tell them that, we're flat and we think we're good, but there's a much greater risk there. The selectman's office, there's less of a risk, given that it's just their
Because
office.
it's 2,000 up over 24. So.
Yeah.
But I-
I'm just looking at
I
every
can also
account.
resend out we did the six-month review of expenditures to date, so
Right.
we do have that information as well.
I'd
Right.
like that, because I basically
that, right?
felt
Yeah,
the
you
same
have
way
it.
that
We
you
have it.
did.
We
that-
have it.
We have it too.
Yeah, we do, we got it in the one of our last meetings,
Mhm.
February meeting, I think, February meeting.
But, yeah, you know, I kind of, I was looking at the numbers and everything, and I was thinking, you know, we have to sort of
This is
guess
always
on
my
what's happening
complaint to town meeting.
in the calendar year that we're here, no,
You don't have to
calendar
guess, 'cause
year.
you do have it, so you have the presentation that I made
Okay.
that went through 6 months, so
Alright.
that's a good tool, a resource for you.
All right,
General manager's office, very similar, not any significant changes. Again, a little bit of flexibility here in an operating budget that really pays for professional development and office supplies. So that's where I want to be cautious, we're able to say we can hold a line here, but you go 4 or 5 years with an office line of holding it, and everything that you're spending does go up, and at some point that does have an impact, and sometimes you hope you're not whacking the budget, 10%, 15%, 20% a couple of years, because you haven't increased things. But we generally try, in some departments we have to do it, to avoid just saying, well, we should go up 1%. It's all, one of the office areas where we have a little bit of that flexibility.
Well, and this number is at least $8,000 over what you spent last year. I mean, FY '24.
Right, so we feel confident. And again, there's less of that commodity risk, there's not a, oops, we have to send 10 people to a conference all of a sudden, or else, so you can get by with saying, look, this is where it is. It's one of those areas where it's easier to say, hey, this is what we have, and this is what we're gonna spend, and we're gonna make it work. It's not like veteran services where we come up with a number, but if that number just ends up being higher because there's a higher demand on the services, we have to go ahead and do it. Finance commission costing us just a little bit more money, and that's just the cost of the audit, which ends up getting booked here, because for some reason that's how we've always done that. We do have new auditors this year. They're doing well so far, I guess.
And do we expect, I know that the audit is like a multi-year contract, right?
3 years, yes.
So we expect similar costs over those 3 years?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the increase is, but yeah, it's a minimal increase each year.
Okay,
Yeah, they kind of leveled it out. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll come in, and because the first year they have to do a lot more work,
that's what I was wondering.
they heavy loaded the first year. We sort of look at just spread it out, and we've had the same auditors for probably 25 years, so it's about time we
Okay.
switched out. Finance and accounting, again, no significant changes here other than the salary changes. We are still at 4 folks in the office, which we have been for quite some time, and they plug along pretty well with the work they have to do. The assessor's office, same thing, staffing levels the same, no significant change to the department here. Tim's nominal increase in legal expenses there, it's a lawyer, but it's the abatement process, so it's not really like it's town council expenses, so that's why we've always kept that separate from the regular legal line. Treasurer's office, a couple of expense increases here. Again, one of the items that we're bringing up is the banking charges that we pay, or I should say, we pay a couple percentage points on ambulance revenues, so that gets booked to the treasurer's office. We have gone 15 different ways with DOR to try to find a way around this, because it's frustrating that we try to hit a spending target, the target is X%, we're cutting somewhere else because we have to raise Alex's budget $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it happens to be, but we know that we're generating the revenue from that same amount, but there's no other way to get around it, unfortunately.
That can't be offset, again, when you calculate out the ambulance revenues, you have a revenue, you can't take an expense directly on that.
No,
Unfortunately, this is one we have to pay as a kind of an AP voucher, you can't get a net payment on it.
Okay.
we asked if we could get a net payment, we asked if they could just decrease the rate and not charge, I mean, we looked at every possible avenue, and it's not a huge deal, it's frustrating that, when we're trying to say, look, we can't go up above 4% or 5%, and then we know that we have to add costs in some way that directly come back with a revenue somewhere, it's just a frustrating work. The only way to avoid it would be if you did an enterprise fund, or if you did a revolving account for it, but we would just be transferring all that money back to the general fund anyway, so now you're talking about an inordinate amount of,
On the other hand,
Playing around with
means we're making more money, so in the end, it's worthwhile.
Which line item are we talking about here?
Collection agents,
Okay.
line 69.
So,
Like I mentioned, that should be a percentage of ambulance revenue, so it is under budgeted here as well. It probably needs to be up another $25,000 to $30,000 to be an appropriate expense. But again, getting to the number that we were told to get to, this is where we landed.
and it's also an example where if ambulance receipts came in very low, which would be bad, this number would come in low, so.
Okay.
So we're just hoping we find that someplace else in the budget, that amount, if we know that's gonna be.
Well, as Tony's mentioned, that
Yeah.
kind of, that hurts the treasurer's expense budget, because then it would have to come out from other lines in there, or again, it would be year-end transfer.
Yeah.
It's one of those lines, it's not the worst thing if we end up over, because it means we took in the revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, in a perfect world, if we could budget for sort of best practice, we would say, okay, take 10% of ambulance revenues last year and target this number to be 20% above that, so we have all the flexibility in the world, but we just don't have the cash to do that.
Okay.
No changes in the treasurer's office from a personnel standpoint. Town council, we're keeping flat, we are not in a contract year. We have been raising this pretty consistently the last 4 or 5 years, we've been going up 20-something grand a year. So we're hopeful we'll be good.
Yeah. When's the next time as a town you're gonna review, your contract with town council and whether to, retain who we have or maybe, you know, put it out to bid or
So,
review?
I mean, we use 28 different law firms for
I
special
know, but I
cases
mean,
for
you
general
should-
town council.
Yeah.
The board last looked at it about 6 years ago. They brought in a number of firms, and what we did at the time is we actually split. Murphy Hesse did our general counsel, and they did our labor council,
Mhm.
and we split them at the time, to
Right.
have a different firm that
Different
specialized a
labor
little bit
council,
more
yeah.
in labor. Murphy Hesse wants us to go up in their annual charge, so the board may wanna look at that, but on the one hand, it's exempt from procurement, on the other hand, unless somebody's really sort of digging you, wouldn't necessarily pick it based on price. We are one of Murphy Hesse's legacy clients, so we do have a pretty good deal with them. I don't think there'd be any significant savings. It's about whether or not the board would decide they were.
Well, you think the services will be better?
That's what the board would have to decide is, you know, do we think is there something we're getting that we don't want? I can tell you one of the problems, and the last time we did it was a great process. We brought them all in, they had to talk to the board, it was a good meeting, and they made some decisions. A lot of the firms that are out there that do municipal law, their principal will come in, they will sell you on them, and you know, I'm the head of the firm, and you're gonna get me, and this is what I'm gonna do for you, and I'm gonna be incredibly responsive. And then like, when you buy software from somebody a year later, it's like, yeah, my junior associate Sam over there is gonna take care of you and write your legal opinion. So they come in with a great sales pitch and then sort of walk off. But I wouldn't be surprised if the board wants to look at it in the next
Okay,
year or two
something to
anyway.
think
just-
about.
Can I go back to treasurer's office for a
Sure.
minute? Curious how the collections works for, light department and, water and sewer. I know, like, if I write a check and drop it in the mail, it goes to Boston.
Yeah.
Right, and there's some system that's processing that. Where does that show up in the budget?
So for their, it's part of that collection charge, although the light department pays their portion of, theirs is tied into the bill sending. Does that make sense?
Oh, maybe, and so I know that there's, like, they
There's
pay an
no-
offset.
Not with giving out secrecy, but there's basically no fee because we keep a certain amount of balance in the actual bank account. So there's transaction fees and banking fees that are embedded in a lot of the transactions that the office does, but we
Okay,
never have to pay those.
Okay.
So we have an agreement, a certain amount of balance that stays there, doesn't get interest on it, that covers what their estimated fees are for the year. And again, Alex has a regular conversation with them to see what that balance should be. So the bank is picking up the charges
okay.
effectively.
Because we maintain the balance.
Correct.
Exactly.
If you
And
go
we're
back
not
to, if
receiving
you,
interest.
yeah, if you go back to a zero interest rate environment or negative interest rate environment like we saw, you're gonna see bank fees come on as a payout.
Okay,
But for now, it's all behind the scenes.
okay,
We had $20,000 or $30,000 in banking charges. You know, it's always a de minimis amount. There's always something to pay. When Eastern Bank took over from, I forget who they bought out. Oh, they took out, it's an MMDT. It was somebody, they took over the company that had a lot of our trusts. All of a sudden, those costs started going up. We got the hell out of Eastern Bank because they weren't willing to deal with us.
got it, okay.
Can I
Alright.
ask,
Yeah.
on the legal?
Yeah.
What happened in 2024 that it's so much lower? I get we're staying flat to budget, but this was a significant increase in 2025. That was a contract year, correct?
Yes, so most of the work was done, I think, in 2024, and we didn't use Labor Council to the extent that we normally did.
No, but 2024, so is 221.
Is the,
It's a really low number.
It's a
Yeah.
really low number? Year
yeah,
in
it was,
20
it was a low year. We really did not use Labor Council. to
Okay,
receive-
so most of the work for the contracts was done in 25?
Correct, but you can see that we've had other issues here.
No, I
and
get,
here.
I understand that, that's why that's an anomaly.
Yeah. And we didn't use Labor Council as much in the preparation period. because we had some staff that were able to do some of the work. You don't always have that.
Okay,
And it was, knock on wood, an easier negotiating round,
okay,
less contentious.
okay.
We've had less grievances, I don't want to say we've had less personnel issues, there's always the sort of normal
Mhm.
churn of personnel issues, but a grievance can be $40,000 in legal fees, or it can be $4,000 in legal fees.
But 26 is not a contract year?
No.
So,
So why are we
27 is when we would negotiate again, depending on what our staff makeup is, would depend on whether or not we really need labor counsel. We didn't keep them at the table the last time, and that ends up being one of the huge cost drivers, is whether or not you have them at the table.
so then we wouldn't, then why are we keeping it flat? If
This
we're
is,
not
this
gonna
is,
have-
this is a more average of what we're gonna spend. This is just an anomaly in a lot of reasons. We really cut down our use of labor counsel.
Okay,
But as I said, similar to one of those commodity costs, something happens, a lawsuit pops up,
Mhm.
something else comes up, we'll end up having to spend more. HR budget up a little bit because we have the full booking of the shared generalist position, or I call it the recruitment position. Last year, we had booked, I think, 9 out of 12 months, knowing that this year we'd be booking the full body, if you will. So HR has grown to 5 full-time employees from just 3 a few years ago, but it is really a shared human resources department between the town and the schools. And I know Lisa she's doing as much work for the schools as she does for the towns. We are, we're structured, we have the director, we have an assistant director who manages benefits, and we have the 3 generalists. One is sort of leaning more towards town issues, one more takes care of school issues, and then we have the recruitment person who tries to centralize a lot of that. We might be, Kim and I have been working, we might be bringing forward a proposal to purchase and implement a electronic onboarding system, because right now we still do all of that by paper. And we may do it electronically, but it's you come to the office, you fill out some paperwork, or you fill out a Google packet, and then we take it and we dump it into Munis. And we use different platforms to interview people and to hire people or to post jobs. Munis has an opportunity, it costs some money, we have the base software to build it. We would have a single platform for hiring everyone. So you log on to norwoodmunis.com, fill out your information, and then we can take that through the interview and the onboarding process and the hiring process. It has all the nice widgets that other software has where they send the rejection letters when the time comes. And then that will tie right into an appropriate onboarding system, all your tax paperwork, all your filings, and that feeds right into Munis. Right now, it's unfortunately still a fairly manual process. It's costly, so we're not sure, and we gotta make sure it works for all the weird little pieces to make it work, but
That's the kind of thing, though, that I think might make sense when we have a lot of free cash, right? Like, if it's a one-time expense that we're gonna have to spend some money to get this built up and set up and going, but then it's gonna make things more efficient going forward, that's exactly what you wanna spend free cash for.
absolutely, we're just making sure we're sort of whittling it down. You might see it on the warrant in May. We wanna make sure we've got the appropriate resources to do it. We know the data piece that we have to do it, because we have to make some data adjustments to do it, and then the schools have a particular need with 1 or 2 of their other software packages to make sure everything flows through, because the last thing we wanna do is, hey, it's great, okay, it's time to enroll in this system. Oh, wait a minute, go get the piece of paper and take it and manually fill it in.
On the other hand, I mean, I get it, but I wouldn't rush things through. I mean, if it means you have to wait until the fall, you wait until the fall to get it done.
We more wanna know what we wanna do and then be able to say, look, this is gonna take us 18 months because we
Yeah.
need to have a programmer come in and
Yeah.
do this and just make sure the data
Yeah,
is correctly. One of the things we have to fix is how we manage positions in Munis, which would allow Munis to do a little
Yeah.
bit more of the budgeting. I'm old school and like to do it with a spreadsheet, but everyone yells at me and tells me that the computer should do it.
don't you just download the spreadsheets? It works that way. You can.
I like to use Excel. Information technology budget. We made some reductions here, no staffing changes. Software and program costs continue to escalate. Vision, which is the software that the assessor's office uses, is killing us. These are software packages that, what ends up happening is the percentage increase is sometimes ridiculous, but because the dollar amount is not that high, you sort of ignore it. But then when you've got 12 software packages that go up $600 a piece, all of a sudden the costs start to escalate. The bulk of our cost in IT is Munis's $250,000, $300,000 as a base software. Our email system is about $100,000. We probably spend $100,000, $150,000 having to maintain legacy data. I think as everyone knows, we have to keep so much data. We have to keep it forever. We have software, we track all of our social media posts. We are required to keep all of those for 7 years. So whenever we post on Facebook, it's not Agorapulse. I think it is Agorapulse. No, Agorapulse is one of them does the posts all of them, and one of them keeps all of the data. So we have to unfortunately keep a lot of records. Software cost escalation is frustrating. We got a grant for Diligent, for instance, a couple years ago. We liked it. We got an introductory price, and it was gonna go from 15,000 to 22,000 to 31,000. We said we can't, like, this is not, for us, it's not worth it, so we're just making Google work for, at least for the board's agendas of some other departments. So it's something we always keep an eye on, because cheap software very quickly, 5 or 6 years later, escalates into something that's just a little bit more ridiculous.
But at this point, these costs here are existing software that you're just maintaining.
Yeah, we haven't bought a, if we buy new software, we're buying a $3,000-4,000 package for something, it's usually replacing something else. You know, we do our Windows licensing, we probably have 160 PCs for Windows licensing.
Sure.
I mean, when we do, one of the questions I sometimes get is, you know, do we have too many licenses, we have all the software out there? It's really, what do you need, and if you need it, we'll get it for you. If not, stay away, and we won't, you know, we won't bother getting it for you. I think we have less than 50 Adobe licenses, because it's like, at the end of the day, there's not that many of us that actually need to download and be able to use Adobe Pro.
Yeah.
The average DPW worker out there in the field is not, you know, downloading something in his truck and, you know, filling out fillable PDFs. At least I don't think they are, but maybe they are. Maybe Mark knows they are.
So the software licenses are on that line 104. What's in data processing?
So that is a combination of our, that's where we pay our phone bill out of, both our cell phone bill and the town's actual phone bill. And then our email system is about $100,000 a year. We those both come out of the data processing lines. Or the data processing line might be Munis, and the other line is, there's another one.
Yeah, because the line for
Telephone data.
telephone data.
Telephone data.
So telephone data is likely email in our phone system. I think our phone bill, and that's for our physical phones, is $65,000-70,000 a year. That's actually a shared expense in the sense that that's all the school phones too. We just pay it out of one budget. Our cell phone bill with Verizon is, call it $85,000 annually. And every year we go through those and we always check for open lines. And we've brought in some of those third-party services too that say, we can save you money on your bill. And it's like, all right, well, bet, like, let's give it a shot. And sometimes they find an open line here or there, and sometimes we've got to send Sean crawling in the basement somewhere to find out why there's a line that we can't figure out. But every time we cut them, then we add a few here. But we're always trying to prune it to see what we could get. We almost switched off Verizon, which is where the general government phones are, because they're difficult, and they gave us a good deal to stay with them. Told us they might build an extra tower in town, which is what we need, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Is-
that's actually where they,
Yeah, under IT, is that where we also do the website?
yeah, the website's a very small cost.
I
'cause
did,
it's,
considering the quality of the website, I could certainly understand that. Because, I mean, I feel I have to be a Russian hacker to be able to navigate your website, it's awful.
now, in our defense, you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. We looked at the Google Analytics for our website a couple of years ago. About half the people that go to our website are paying a bill. The next 35 to 45% are looking at job opportunities. 10% is everything else. So, I use the website all the time. When I need something, I go to the website to get it. I don't even go to any of our
So
shared
do I,
ones.
that's,
Wait,
I try to, let me rephrase it, I try to.
So, but here's the thing, out of that 10%,
The bill isn't fun.
yeah, out of that 10%, I think it's like us that are constantly using the website. I don't think anyone actually goes onto our
It's just you
website.
and Tony.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Well,
you know,
maybe if there was actually useful information there, maybe somebody else would try.
yeah, so, I mean, not to prolong the discussion, I get it, but I look at other towns' websites, I would think they have the same ratio of uses and types of uses as we do, they're a heck of a lot better than us.
In my defense, Tim's website is worse than mine, so, at least in terms of how it looks. The superintendent and I.
This is not a comparison, we are just discussing it.
Well, but ours is bad, it's hard to find something worse than ours, when there's something nearby that's worse than ours. No, the website is mediocre at best. We are working with the PR firm that we use that did the website for the middle school, to see if we can,
I
again,
don't
put
think it's
together.
great either, to be perfectly honest.
Well, there again,
Could be user. I
can you,
don't know.
can you do a website for a couple $1,000s, and the response is, sure, we can
Sure,
do that.
yeah.
But we're looking at whether we want them to build, like a town and a school website, and again, go in together, do it at once, make sure that the sort of, the architecture behind the scenes are the same. If you look at, I think it's Georgetown, Mass, they're a relatively small town on the North Shore, they have an attractive website. The same firm, and again, we probably have to go out to bid for it, that did theirs, we might want to do
Yeah.
ours, because it is time to refresh.
Yeah, I don't care how attractive it is, I just wanna be able to easily find something other than, you know, hunt and peck through, 15 different, literally, different pages.
Well, we put stuff in different places, and sometimes it
Yeah,
likes to,
okay.
it did some update about 6 months ago where it rearranged how documents were uploaded, we did nothing with it, and all of a sudden, it changed. It is
Okay.
crappy, it is cheap, it's
All right.
less than $5,000 a year, which is
Well,
why we get what we
my
pay for.
point is made, okay.
I mean, Alan, if you're looking to increase the budget, I'm sure we can,
It's
find a
5
way to
minutes,
do
we're
it.
never getting that.
Whatever.
So you mentioned the cell phones are on Verizon, the landlines are on North Broadband, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And we have, our public safety phones are on AT&T, because AT&T has FirstNet. So in an emergency, it gives a boost to public safety phones. We also don't want one vendor for everything, just for redundancy's sake. If
Yeah.
worst case scenario, AT&T goes down and it's gonna be down consistently, we have a backup of the Verizon and vice versa. If both go down, you know, we can only plan for so much. Town clerk and elections and registrations, nothing significant here, other than this is one of those budgets that tends to fibrillate as the election season is going. There's no real easy solution for it, we can't do elections as an enterprise fund, but it goes up and down based on what we have going on at any given time.
I have
Sure. Yeah, no, that's what we're here for.
Is there ever been any consideration, I just look at the part-time, or the overtime, or like the cost of elections and things, has there ever been any consideration to consolidating election sites around town? Because I hate to say it, but I've never really stood in a line to vote.
Yeah, we could, appropriate public notice, reduce them down. We would have the same number of precincts, you would have more in one place.
Right,
You'd save on a couple of police details. Honestly, what we pay the poll workers in Norwood and most towns, barely a legal amount. It's probably time we look at that, especially because,
I
you
know
know,
the school's the best, I suppose, so I just, because it, I mean,
interesting enough, my hometown of Randolph started voting in temples and churches because of an issue at a school where there was an accident one day. Now we sort of try to peg it around days being off. The short answer is we absolutely could. There wouldn't be a significant savings, but maybe it's time to stop saying here's 57 different places that folks can vote. And all day election day, people come into town hall and they call, where do I vote, where do I vote, where do I vote? We wouldn't be able to make one place work, but in a perfect world, we'd have one place work. But then you have that little bit of the equity issue. There's the people who live over by the Prescott, and that's the other side of Route 1, who's in South Norwood, but do I think we need all the locations we have? No, I think we do.
Again, when we're looking at, some of the budget issues we've had, a little bit here, a little bit there, tends to
Starts to
add
make a
up.
difference, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Community development, here again, no significant changes here. One item I do want to put out there, again, they kept their operating budget flat. Last year, we reduced, or I should say, my proposed budget, which, thank you all supported and the selectmen supported, we eliminated that $10,000 deposit into the conservation fund. Town meeting saw fit to reverse that. So, in an effort to reflect town meeting's wishes, I have put it back in the budget, but certainly wouldn't be sad if it left. But I put it back in there just assuming that town meeting probably would, they voted pretty handily to put it back in there. I assume that that would happen again.
The other item that was discussed at the same time at town, or around the same time at town meeting was
Mark, right now.
ARC.
ARC, thank you.
ARC and St. Catherine's Nurse. We are working with ARC. We believe we found some grant funding, third-party funding to take care of ARC.
Okay.
St. Catherine's Nurse is not in the budget. I don't know that that's going to be a warrant item. I have not spoken directly with the selectmen about it, but I have not heard any, should this be on their suggestions.
Well, and if we are considering the will of town meeting, there was a lot more support for ARC last year than there was for St. Catherine's money, if you look at what the
Just
votes
tone
were.
and intent,
Yeah.
And ARC is a much easier service to take some existing funding from somewhere and say, hey, we're gonna pay for a third of this contract because it provides this service. St. Catherine's Nurse gets a little bit, separating out whether you support it or not, it's just a little bit harder to be able to do that and justify it with any other funds we might have.
I know this came last year, but on the community development,
Yeah.
the operating expenses doubled basically last year. So and I know Jeff, I know you've reported to us on this, like thus far this year, we have the 6-month report, but nothing changed in this budget, and I understand we're crunching, but have we looked again to see that this is reasonable in spending that
They based on where it is. So remember that last year, that was sort of Sarah's first full year coming in, so department heads tend to be a little bit more cautious in that first year.
Okay,
We would always be able to adjust it if we did, but as an example, if we wanted to do even a small corridor plan or something, that's $20,000 or $30,000. So we're still not quite there, and some of these lines that they just get stuck with, there's one in there for boards and commissions, I think. That covers historic commission and just any other smaller boards and commissions if they happen to need something. I think there's $4,000 of that, that's the historic commission, I can't see the line, but it's in there somewhere. Just as an example. But those are always sort of the department budgets that we try to prune down once we've seen some consistency one way or another with where they're going.
okay.
Oops, sorry, I almost skipped over the annual town report. Very critical increase of $75. We're still printing annual town reports. We have dropped this down quite a bit and reduced the number that we print quite a bit just to make sure we have a few historic copies.
You were going to do something about those town reports, weren't you? Weren't you working on them?
If you know the old town reports in the manager's
Yeah.
office, yeah, we've been going through one whole set to restore them. I pulled a couple of those CPA projects this year, just to have a lengthier discussion with CPA about some of their process at some point, and candidly, some of those projects should come from the Historic Commission, they sort of bless them, but I gotta get the Historic Commission to be the ones preparing and submitting those as well, that really should be their, I wouldn't wanna take that fun away from them, that's how I would say it. So I think there's one more set that needs to get done, but wanted to have another, I haven't had a chance yet, a further conversation with CPA about, you know, how do they wanna see some of these things, and some of them we break up into small pieces. A little bit of the communication with CPA about, you know, they had their list of questions, which is fine, that's what they're there to do, but we prepared some applications, and then they hadn't gotten them, and they already had their questions, and didn't read the applications, so just working on a little bit of that internal work, and there still needs to be a discussion about where CPA and their staff support should sort of live in the building, if you will. We just kind of got it started out of planning, and sort of said it's kind of a planning function, but should the planning department be backing up CPA applications that are town applications? I'm not sure that that's what we want to do, so I took a pull back on some of them to just kind of look at some of those issues. General government, this is our general government unallocated line. It covers a couple of things like town meeting and other items. It's a catch-all. Some part-time staff when we need help from an intern or somebody to cover an office here. Again, an item that's largely flexible. If we were to have 5 or 6 town meetings, obviously we'd be looking for money, but we've been fairly stable the last couple of years. All right, moving into the larger departments, we have the police department. Contractually mandated growth, contractually mandated obligations are what's driving the majority of the budget growth here, as well as some increases in cost to run the department. The police department, similar to the fire department, being a little bit larger than, being a lot larger than most of the rest of our departments, inflation hits them a little bit differently than it does in a department that can just say, well, we're gonna print less, or we're gonna bring our dirty old pens from home and order a little bit less. The police department and the fire department do have to operate. Salary increase is the biggest in the police department. Most of our AFSCME contracts had a step in the middle of the contract, which is why this is a bigger of a bump here. The police department steps work a little bit differently, but it was roughly the equivalent in this year for them. What we're seeing it's both a good and a bad thing. The last couple of, we've recruited a couple of officers recently since we're out of civil service who are transfers. Now that's both good and bad. It's good because we're getting them in and they're able to go right on the road within a couple of weeks. It's bad because they sometimes tend to be a little bit more expensive. They're starting further up on the step scale. They usually have already completed their degrees. And some of our officers, as they age out, don't have the same education as younger officers coming in. I think with one exception, everyone's had a bachelor's degree probably the last 5 or 6 years. Most of them have had master's degrees. So you see that short-term increase in the operating budget because, crap, I'm stealing an officer from here, and he's already got 5 years on, and he's already got his master's degree, and he's got this certification, that's costing me more up front. But the alternative is when I hire somebody and take them from the academy, they're cheaper, but I'm paying that full salary for a year, and we're getting nothing out of them. As the chief will tell you, it probably takes you 5 years before you're a good officer. So that upfront cost and not having to waste time hiring people and training them, and that sounds bad, not that we don't want to train them, that's better for us long-term. You'll see that when we get to the fire department in a few minutes, where we're almost at the point of being able to recruit paramedics. That's a 2 to 2.5 year process. If we have to send somebody to the academy and to paramedic school, you're paying almost 3 years of a salary for somebody who does nothing for us. So yeah, they're cheaper than the existing paramedic, but it's a drag on the budget, if you will, to have spots that they're just going to training. The police department functions very well, I think as everyone knows. Our wages are competitive. We're not so far out of the realm of anyone else. When I say we're recruiting officers, they're from smaller towns like Whitman and Hanson and one of the Attleboroughs. So we're not really stealing folks from nearby towns. We did just recently get somebody from Wellesley, but they happen to live in Walpole, so for them, it just sort of makes sense. And we do have the right mix of we're just busy enough, but it's not, not terrible. So if you work in a smaller, slower town, it's a little bit easier to, a little bit more enjoyable to work in a community like Norwood, also because we're wonderful, but just in terms of attracting police officers, that's helpful to us. I'm sure this can, Ann?
I just had a question. How many
Please.
offices do we have?
65,
65.
full-time, yep. And then we have specialists that just work details, they're retired officers.
Right, yeah.
We don't really count those as on our salary, because they only work details.
So we have stayed at that plateau for quite a while.
So we increased the number of officers when we went to regional dispatch, because
Yeah.
we lost some of our, we had to cover the desk. So where we had dispatchers, we lost some of our dispatchers, we increased the number of officers, and that's actually worked out for us in a number of ways. One of the biggest things that's actually helped us with is when we are going through that training cycle, like Tony said, when we lose somebody, it takes us over a year to get somebody back up to speed, which hits us in the overtime lines and things along those lines. That little bit of extra room with officers
Yeah.
prevents forcings and helps us kind of keep the department running without having to be in critical mode,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I mean, Chief, again, in terms of what Tony was talking about, and, I mean, when you have an opening, you wanna hire an officer, I mean, do you necessarily first go to, maybe there's a list of people in other communities, or do you, go to people, who have to go to training?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated, it depends on the situation we're in. So we just took, prior to this group that we just hired, which was, I hired a number of laterals, because I needed people now.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait for 4 or 5 people to go into the academy and go, but we had a group prior to that was all young kids from Norwood, and
Okay.
they've worked out great, but, I have to really make that decision based on the facts and circumstances at the time. And, like Mr. Mizuko said, we're very fortunate that we're drawing people. The biggest problem facing policing right now across the country is recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
People do not want to be police officers. And towns like, North Attleboro took a huge hit because they were losing people faster than they could replace them. And then you end up with a group of officers. You really do need 5 years to become a journeyman police officer and really know what you're doing. And then you have a department that's all a bunch of people that are under 5 years, and then your guys that are getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
And so we've actually been able to replace some of our officers in that mid-level.
You have a good mix.
Yeah, and the ability to draw people here has been a huge benefit for us.
Good.
And like you said, the size of the department plus, wages are good. We offer a lot, and that's really been the draw.
So I have a couple of
Please.
questions, Chief. You mentioned, or I guess Tony mentioned that there's sort of this extra step that's been added this year because as part of the contract.
With
So-
police, with police, the rough equivalent was we were at full Quinn this contract year.
Okay,
So that's the full education benefit that
Yeah.
the state used to pay for, went away in, I think, 2008 or 9. It's taken
Yeah.
us 15 years to finally get to the point where we're back to where full Quinn is, paid the way Quinn used to be, so.
okay.
So it changed from a flat rate to a percentage, which kind of equivocated out to that step.
Yep.
And
Okay.
that was one of the changes that we went through.
So I was curious about, this is a 3-year contract, right? This
Yes.
is the first year of the 3-year
Yes.
contract. So that extra isn't gonna, we're not gonna have that same increase next year. That extra is gonna stay in there, but
Yeah, it'll work itself out. So this year you'll see it, and after that it should just, it won't jump again.
won't be, you don't expect a 7.6% increase?
No, there shouldn't be
Next year,
across the
okay.
board.
That was,
There was some other things that came into play, the body worn cameras and things, so we had to contractually negotiate that. So there was a little bit of a bump there, which you won't see again next year.
okay.
So things along those lines. There's been a lot of changes in the police world, and,
Yeah.
sometimes we had to kind of deal with some of those issues.
Okay. And then the other question I had was around overtime. I understand that overtime is a normal part of
Yeah.
doing business. But I was just curious, looking at these overtime numbers, the 26 numbers are all just 7.5% greater than the 25 numbers, but those are significantly higher than the FY24 actuals.
Yes.
So I guess, like, how realistic do we think these numbers are?
They're realistic. So FY '24 was an unusual year. We took a large chunk of money and we transferred it into expenses. It was $240 some odd thousand. So that drove down the numbers because we were short so many people. And I don't know if you remember this at town meeting, we had that big transfer to buy a bunch of equipment that we were able to get without going to the capital committee.
Right.
So, so that changed those numbers and drove down the 24
Okay, so you
number.
think 24 was artificially low?
Because we were so short of people.
Okay,
So we found ourselves with money and we decided it was a good time to buy equipment without going to capital.
okay, all right, thank you.
And you'll see that somewhere along the line where there's a big change in the numbers on the next page. I think it's, you'll see FY '24 total expenses 802
Yeah,
versus,
okay,
versus
yeah,
we're at 613 this year.
got it, okay.
And then the the increase in expenses is just because we got cut in our expenses the year prior. And then now with inflation, we won't make it, so we had to have an increase in our expense across the board.
Got it, okay, thank you. Are there other questions?
Already covered one.
Okay, thanks.
Just two other things to point out, police department, with body worn cameras, we got away with, I think, a one-time payment and something for some administrative items for the officers. Some towns are giving away, or being required to give 1, 2, 3, 4% increases for body worn cameras. For POST, which is the state's Peace Officer Standards Training Commission, that's the state commission that certifies police officers. I don't think we gave anything permanent up. Some towns have given 6% raises for POST. That's actually sort of the norm that's out there for having to comply with POST is roughly a 6% increase. And some towns are doing it directly for POST, sometimes they're hiding it somewhere else, but that's we've been fortunate that our department has never tried to just say, this is out there, give us the money. They've worked with us to try to be reasonable where we can, understanding if all their colleagues are getting something, we need to try to do it, but we've done well with at least those particular issues.
Thank you.
And jumping to the fire department, similar contractual increases. This year, one of the big increases is again related to education. We are out of civil service, so the sort of bargaining chip, if you will, to get out of civil service was a significant increase in the education incentive to bring it close to what police get. It's not quite what police get. That's becoming more the norm in fire departments throughout the state, or at least throughout eastern Massachusetts. It used to be that was the paramedic stipend. What you're seeing now more is firefighters are looking for that education incentive. The reason is that the paramedic stipend has pretty much become, it's what the job is. So it used to be, hey, we really want you to be a paramedic, here's extra %. Now it's, we need paramedics, so we'd like in the next round to just work that into the base salary, because sometimes it's a little ridiculous to say, well, your salary is $60,000, but we're gonna give you an extra 20% for being a paramedic, because we need you to be a paramedic and we need you to be on the ambulance. Now, we're finally on the verge of recruiting a couple of paramedics, maybe, for actual paramedics. That is probably, if you think of the academy and going to paramedic school, it's a close to a 3-year process. But there again, if we have an older firefighter who retires, who was just a basic EMT and wasn't riding, they leave, we bring on a younger guy who is a paramedic, sometimes that could be a 15 or 20% salary differential. So over time, that paramedic cost will go up, but we're one of the rare departments in the area that's not all paramedics. Westwood right next door, for instance, they only have 40 or so officers, they're 100% paramedics. So it's gonna take us 20 years to get there, but getting out of civil service, if honestly, getting one paramedic would make it worth it. It's next to impossible to find them statewide. Other than that, some increases in the cost of equipment. One particular line item in there for a contract is for our striker units. Those are units we have to maintain. Those are the sort of automatic lift stretchers, if you will, on the expense side. Other than that, we have added a little bit of fire staffing over the years. We've added the deputy fire chief at this point 6 years ago, I should say second deputy fire chief. We've added a second fire inspector to create some redundancy in the office. So those are all positive moves. Overall fire department staffing we are looking at some point. It's probably, with the call volume that we have and with the hospital being down for at least a few more years, probably not adequate, but that's of course not addressed in this budget. I have a slide later on that just talks in brief about what that cost might look like when we want to get to, when we get there.
I was just gonna ask about the effect of the hospital, you gonna talk about that later?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So the career incentive line, I'm assuming that's the education line, would we expect to see a similar increase next year? Or are we there and we'll go
It'll increase again next year.
45% again?
No, I don't think it'll go up that much.
Am I looking at the wrong
No,
line?
I'm gonna-
Yeah.
So it went up 45% this year.
Yeah, that's a significant jump. I don't think it'll go up that much next year, but younger officers, I mean, we have firefighters that have master's degrees now. 10 years ago, that was unheard of.
Mhm.
Any of the younger officers that we're bringing in, they're usually coming in with a 4-year degree, and then some of them are getting their master's degree. I think we have 2 or 3 in grad school now. I don't think the jump will be as big because we've booked most of the cost already, but we have 5 or 6 guys in school looking to get their education now that we're incentivizing them for it.
I noticed that maintenance of equipment went way up this year, 185%.
That's a contractual issue, chief, that's the national fire information that we talked about.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's the First Due.
I'm sorry, what is that
It's
again?
called the First Due program. It takes care of all of our, what's currently NFIRS information. It's changing to NERIS after the first of the year, but National Fire Incident Reporting System, it's mandated reporting. It's called NFIRS. The program that we have through HREC, when we made the transition over, we have to pick up the cost of that next year, and that's what the increase is for.
Okay, so this is not maintaining vehicles, this is.
That's correct. No, that's a different line.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we in the first year of the contract here as well, or is this year 2 of the contract on this?
That's year 2.
It's year
We're in
2.
the first year, that's year 2. Everyone's on the same contract schedule.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just ask one question, medical supplies, why that went up as much as it did, since the numbers seem to be, pretty constant for a couple of years?
So our call volume in the ambulance continues to increase dramatically, and the cost of equipment and supplies. We've also been tasked with, this year, we have to pay for the medications that we use in the ambulance back to the hospital, so
Okay,
we're getting billed for that as well, so
Okay. is what it is.
that's what the increase is for.
Okay.
And that gets billed out to the users ultimately?
No, so the hospital, we send the ambulance bill to the patient based on what was done to them, but then the hospital charges us for the medications that we used.
And then the hospital.
They bill
You
us.
stock up at the hospital.
They bill us directly.
I'm just wondering if that's
Just-
offset with revenue from somewhere.
No, this BI is charging us to stock up when we take from, the hospitals used to be a little bit more generous and.
Yes, that's correct.
But we don't bill the people.
It used to be an exchange,
Flat
one-for-one
rate.
exchange, but it is no longer that way.
Yeah, I'm just, because why would
So we-
I just don't know, why would the hospital bill us for medication as opposed to the patient? That's the way they do it?
That's the way it is.
Oh, okay.
So we actually, in our ambulance rates, we have ALS1, ALS2.
Yeah.
That's based on the amount, basically the ALS2 is more medication, it's more serious call. So you're getting billed for that, the patient is initially.
So
Anyways.
indirectly, you're getting,
Yeah.
you're getting it back through the ambulance charge.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
specific to you
I
use
see,
this many
okay.
pills and that many whatever, okay.
And then that's a little bit more complicated,
Yeah.
what we get back for revenue, but.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
essentially we get it back, but just you put out, then you get it back, okay.
Yeah, and part of
And
it,
it's not a one for
when
one.
the hospital was here, there'd been a long-standing arrangement, if the ambulance needed any supplies at the hospital, they would often say, grab some gauze, grab whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
I think with BI needed and other hospitals getting overloaded, they're saying this isn't what we
I gotcha.
signed up for, so screw
Gotcha.
you, you need some Band-Aids, we're charging you. It's a cutthroat industry. Not us, hospitals, we're not, we're nice. Other
Well,
questions?
the hospital's a cutthroat industry.
It's
Okay, interesting,
gross.
okay.
Other questions for the chief?
So do you wanna talk about the hospital? I mean,
Sure.
in terms of what, I know from not having, we're assuming obviously there's no hospital for fiscal '26.
Good
And,
assumption.
good assumption.
Solid.
Right, and I know that one of the impacts of not having a hospital in Norwood, and we have to go elsewhere, is that we put more miles in the ambulances, we have to buy more ambulances.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the other impacts in the operating budget of not having a hospital? Things that
So-
are kind of long-term temporary, if you will,
Fuel, maintenance, and overtime.
okay?
But those pale in relation to the fact that the ambulances aren't gonna get us more than 3 years, because ambulances are up to $625,000 for an ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at maintaining 2 ambulances, we really should have a third and trying to replace them every year and a half. The fire department has an embedded $300,000-400,000 capital cost annually just to run the ambulance service. Now again, we generate $2.5 million. before the hospital closure, we could run the ambulances 5, 6 years, 7 years. It's not that big of a deal to limp an ambulance along when it's just in town where somebody else can run, drive, hook it up to a tow and take it. Now with the distances that we're traveling, we're croaking them in 2 to 3 years. And they're out longer than they used to, they're traveling further than they used to, they're idling longer than they used to. One of the challenges we have, we're getting to hospitals and we're waiting because the emergency rooms are full. So that all adds to the wear and tear. The cost is significant. The impact on emergency services is more so. It is exhausting our current firefighters and EMS folks. I mean, when I say that emergency services in central Norfolk County are on the verge of collapse, we're a bad day away from people just walking away from the job, not just here, but anywhere. They're dedicated and they're committed, but you're talking about, you know, going constantly because the natural call volume is up, and then sitting in a car, driving past a closed hospital, sitting in traffic in Boston, sitting in traffic in Needham, getting to an emergency room, people stacked up in the hallways, and then you're waiting, and, you know, the state's sitting there sort of, you know, twiddling its thumbs as this all happens. Long-term capital costs are significant, probably $3-4 million over 10 years extra because of the ambulances that we need to run. If you were to tell me there wasn't a hospital coming back, our staffing can't handle the emergency needs we have in the community. We're still running like it's an emergency, because it is an emergency. And that's how we're operating, but that adrenaline at some point in time runs out. Even if every single firefighter was a paramedic, we should probably be running 3 or 4 ambulances without a hospital here.
So the cost is really, at the moment, the cost is really a capital cost.
Yeah, and some fuel maintenance and,
A little bit of
but again,
fuel.
even the maintenance is sort of, we gotta replace the damn vehicle in 3 years, that's what's costing us
But then the long-term cost would be if, like you said, if you didn't get a hospital back permanently, then you'd have to look at increasing the operating
Absolutely.
costs,
We may-
additional staffing, additional vehicles.
Yeah, our staffing hasn't changed in a long time anyway, our call volume is up, more calls for things. The region's getting older, we're not turning into an elderly region, but generally the average age of folks is getting older. That leads to more hospital calls, population is growing. One of the studies we're looking at for the hospital, if you take Norwood and the surrounding, call it 7 or 8 towns, since the hospital closed, there's probably been 2,500 housing units built or permitted. The next 5 years, there's probably another 2,500 housing units built or permitted. So this is a growing, economically vibrant region. And then when you add on to that the fact that while we've got our 31,000 people, we've got a daytime population of 60,000. If you're talking about Legacy Place or the Rentham outlets during the holidays, you're massing amounts of people in those areas. When there's a game at Foxborough and Patriot Place is busy, or a concert, you are massing the area. So we're not equipped, our neighbors aren't equipped, we're just still running like it's an emergency.
And maybe just ask the chief, just in terms of, in general, call volume, is intending to be, I mean, I think there's a long-term trend away from fires and into medical,
That's correct.
and that's continuing?
It is.
That trend, that it's less and less houses burning down, and more and more?
We do about 75% of our call volume is medical related.
Okay.
We did 7,100 calls last year,
Yeah.
5,100 of them were medical.
There's a huge uptick in mental health issues as well, that requires the same transport issues that, you know, the police and the fire deal with, and that's really changed since COVID, so, and it's not gonna get better.
And there's 2 other points that I'd like to hit on that Tony mentioned. One is the delivery time to replace an ambulance and or a fire truck are astronomical right now. They're anywhere from 18 months to 2 years for an ambulance, and they're 2 to 2.5 years, sometimes 3 years in the case of a ladder truck, to get trucks once they're actually ordered. So the process is long, and it's long and drawn out, so those are things that we're looking at as well for down the future, because the lead times are crazy for us to get replacements. We're having all kinds of problems with our ladder trucks right now.
1,000 days, it's
so-
ridiculous.
Have you discussed that with Capital Outlay Chief, you know?
My conversation's been with Tony to this point.
Yeah.
This is a recent development with my
Yeah,
ladder.
I would think that, you know, you'd wanna go, because if you need something in 3 years,
Mhm.
and, you know, it takes you 3 years as opposed to a year and a half, then this is the year you wanna buy that piece of equipment.
Correct.
We're working on a proposal to bring forward that might do just that in the fall, where we get an authorization for the ladder truck, knowing that it's 3 years out, and we don't have a formal proposal yet, but what we're thinking is we get a borrowing authorization for it, try to see if we can pre-fund it with cash based on when they want progress payments, so that way we don't have to borrow for it, but we wanna, you know, we would need the borrowing authorization to issue the purchase order to actually tell them to go ahead and start the truck for us, because it's scheduled for replacement FY '29, it's in rough shape as it is, just like the building that houses it, but, if we're looking at 3 years, and the ladder truck's gonna
This
cost
is
us a
when
lot
you
in 3 years,
should-
if
you
we're,
should get it this
if we're
year.
waiting to FY '29, it used to not be an issue, because you get a truck within a year, so you start your work, you go to a town meeting, and 8, 9 months later it comes up, but if we're still looking at 3-year timelines, then all of a sudden FY '29 becomes an FY '32 truck when we get it, it ain't gonna last till FY '32, I'll tell you that much.
Sarah, did you have a question?
No, the last time when I was on Capitol, like, we locked out on ambulances, right? They
Yes.
became available, like, cause I do remember
We literally
this
got 2 floor
conversation.
models.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
that's
what
what I was trying to figure out.
So I think there's one of the plan for this fall to order, which by the time that gets in, if it's 12 to 18 months, will be just around when both of those floor models are getting to their sort of life expectancy for what we can use them. We'll
Okay.
put a new one in, the worst one becomes a reserve, and then we'll limp one
Yeah.
along until we get another one in.
Okay.
So Chief, what would you like to see for ambulance?
So there is one other thing that's happened, so in the first
Okay.
77 days since January 1st, we've had 140 ambulances into town to take patients because we've been tied up, so that continues to increase at a dramatic rate, so.
So Tony had mentioned that we really should have 3 ambulances, and I was gonna ask you, do you mean we should have a third vehicle that is, so that the others can be, serviced and stuff like that, or do you think we really need to staff and run 3 ambulances?
Staff and run, but we might be able to look at a model where we are staffing it core peak periods, 3 o'clock in the morning, we don't necessarily need 3, but is there a model there that we can run it 10 hours a day, 6 days a week type of thing? Again,
And
Yeah.
is that model any different if we have a functioning hospital?
it'll make it easier with a functioning hospital because the turnaround time is
Yeah.
less, but even if the hospital was here, I don't think the call volume would change. The call volume is up, our staffing hasn't fundamentally changed.
Okay.
One of the problems that we're facing with fire staffing, and to an extent with police staffing, is what you used to be able to do with 60 people, you can't do anymore. People nowadays take their vacation time, they take their sick time. We used to hire cops and firefighters at 21, and then they would do nothing but work 1,000,000 hours of overtime. The average age is getting up there that we hire cops and firefighters, it's 25 to 30 is a little bit more common, and once they find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, life takes over, they wanna work a certain amount of overtime, and they don't wanna work 100 hours a week like what used to happen. So when you factor all that in, the vacation time, the sick time, that people want lives and they wanna enjoy their lives, terrible as that sounds. Yeah, exactly, the stress of the job, and then people get injured, and now we've learned, listen, if you're injured, stay home, we don't want you coming in, because if you're injured worse, then you're out for 2 years, it's a bigger problem. So what we used to be able to get away with 60 people 20 years ago, when we're not the only agency, we can't do with 60 people anymore. It's getting harder to staff 4 crews of 15 with just 60 firefighters. It should really be 64 or 68, and that's not changing the minimum manning levels, it's just a matter of, we lose people, you're out 3 or 4 people out injured at any given time. You get a couple of people that leave, and we try to get caught up on hiring when we know somebody's leaving, and if we have 3 good candidates, we might say bring 3 in, because by the time they're all ready, we'll be ready to sort of slot them into a space, but even then, we don't always get that, we don't always have the opportunity. 2 people decide to retire, 2 people go out on long-term injury, and then you get 2 guys out sick with something, all of a sudden 10% of the force is gone. And that makes it really hard to go and do it, so that's a compounding issue, but we think a third ambulance could probably be, we could work it out with the union, like a 8, 10, 12 hour block of when we're the most busiest, because 140 ambulances from out of town just since January, that's,
A lot.
yeah.
And how many ambulance runs did we do in that time? Like, what percentage is kind of going out?
Going out to them,
Yeah.
very, very few. I don't have the
No,
exact number.
no.
No, I meant, so like,
Like us
How many have
covering
we
them
done
with
in
that.
no, I didn't mean us
Oh.
covering them, I meant us doing our own. So I'm, like, if, we
That
have,
means both of ours are out.
right, so what I'm wondering is, when we say that 140,
Into us.
came into us, in that time, were we doing 500 calls, were we doing 1,000 calls? Like, what percentage of calls get sent out to somebody else other than Norwood?
Oh, so 140 calls came from other towns, what did we do in that same time period? So what's our total EMS call volume to date?
Oh, right now, total call volume right now is 1508, 19 and a
Okay.
half calls a day.
Okay, so at least 10%, like roughly 10% of our calls, we can't cover.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the
Good
number I was
analogy.
looking for, all right, yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Let me just ask, is there similar stress on the police department from the hospital not being here? Or is it
Yeah,
different?
what ends up happening, well, it's not just that, so back to the mental health stuff. and the changes in the law. So like things that we used to be able to kind of grab somebody that was having a mental health issue, take them to the hospital, we'd throw them in the back of the police car, we'd drive them to the hospital, to the ER, we'd get them seen, you know, on a voluntary level. Right, and now we can't do that, so a lot of times we have to send an officer in the ambulance with the firemen,
Okay,
and then, so they're out of town, and then we have to send a lot of times a chase car to have a second officer to bring the other officer back, so, you know, we're dealing with that, but we're also dealing with changes in how the police are operating with dealing with people. By law now, we have to take more time and de-escalate more and do a lot more and spend a lot more time. So calls that used to take us 8 or 10, 20, 15 minutes are now double, triple, because we have to spend time trying to really work with people, especially in this mental health field. And, you know, police officers are dealing more, doing a lot of counseling as opposed to police work, which is the way everybody is dealing with the same thing.
What we want you to do, and I think
Yeah.
that's,
And it's all good, but it is more
Takes time.
time consuming, and not having the hospital here is a big deal. We do have a clinician that's full-time, that she helps us with mental health follow-ups and things along those lines, and we have a great working relationship with the fire department. You know, and times that they don't feel that they need a police officer to go for mental health transport, we won't go, but we'll leave it to them to ask us whether or not they want somebody, and you know, when in doubt, we'll send somebody.
Yeah.
So, it's a big strength.
okay, thank you.
Other questions for Chief Bailey? And he'll stick around if we want to come at the end.
Okay.
Building department, no major changes there. They are still our moneymaker, although permit activity has slowed quite a bit. So I think the glory days of $14 million in permits are probably past us, but knock on wood. Construction activity is still big in town, but 6 months from now, a year from now, as some of the major projects slow down, the building department will slow down as well. Staffing's been roughly flat here for quite a while. We do tend to flex it with part-timers as needed. You know, we use a couple of retirees. Mark Schubert still helps out, so that's helpful to keep services moving, and it's a little bit better of a model, because when we don't have work for them, they just don't work, as opposed to trying to hire a permanent 15-hour or 20-hour-week building department sub.
Okay.
Emergency management remains unchanged. As I sort of complain every year, it's an area we probably underinvest in. We allocate staff resources the way we can, but it's not the most robust function in the world. Traffic control and street lighting. So street lighting, we're statutorily required to pay for street lights, even though we own our own light department. It's the one thing that's very clear in the law. Traffic controls and fire alarms, some of that is maintenance related to the actual fire alarm system that we maintain, and that's what we have to bill out to fix the traffic control system. We're trying to bring those closer in line with costs. Some years they have bad costs because there's big repairs. We're replacing the downtown signal sections, signalization system, as everyone knows. Hopefully, once that's done, some of these costs will come down. There's a fair amount of duct tape and gum holding together most of our pedestrian and traffic signals in the downtown area.
When do you think that will be done?
Mark, do you wanna jump in the downtown traffic signals?
Yeah, we had a
Need a board
pre-construction
this
meeting
spring.
today, so we're gonna start the submittal process for materials. Actual real work that you'll see out there is probably 2.5 months out. This is a lot of lead time on a lot of these materials. So you'll see a lot of work this late spring through the summer, fall, and probably a little bit early into the spring next year too.
And the bids came in within budget, right? We're very
Yes.
close. We're jumping in engineering and public works. No significant changes to engineering. Again, staffing is flat. We could really combine it into public works if we wanted to. No staffing changes in the public works department.
Can you tell me when their contracts went in?
Same thing, it is a,
So
they're in the
it's
same line. as everyone
25?
else. Yep,
Okay,
so
that's,
25,
that's where
26,
the
27.
big increase from 24 to 25, and then, I mean, more.
Virtually everyone got a,
Okay.
DPW was a year behind everyone. They're lined up with everyone now.
Okay.
The following fiscal year is the year just about everyone gets a step. Snow and ice, we're keeping it as flat as we normally do. Highway maintenance here, you are seeing that decrease, which will come out of road paving. So that number was significantly higher in the past. It is unfortunately cutting down as we look at what we can reduce where we can. We wouldn't wanna go much further because the 2019 override did include $250,000 for road work. So we have raised taxes specifically for that purpose, so we'd be committed to keeping at least that number in the budget.
On snow and ice, I always thought that you had to have an increase, from one year to the next.
The DOR finally said we can stop playing the game of adding $1. As long as we don't cut it, they're fine with it.
Gotcha, okay.
Well, we liked that game.
I know, it's like, it went up. And I think finally Kim, our field rep, was like, really?
Okay.
Waste collection, this is our cost for municipal waste collection. This is a landfill cost. We have some monitoring costs for the landfill. My LASIK is failing, I can barely read the screen from here. We have some monitoring costs for the landfill, and as you know, we do take in some recycling. There's really no cost like the swap shop, for instance, with some of the materials that we take in, as well as monitoring of the landfill. Waste removal, our favorite topic, trash, 30-year contract, significant increase at about $190,000. It is worth reminding everyone this is a commodity cost. It is based on what we project we've been using and what that number is actually going to come in at. Trash tends not to spike or valley too much, but it is based on the amount of trash that we're collecting and recycling rates and everything else.
Yeah, do we have a different rate still for recyclables?
We do.
Okay, and is the amount sent to recyclables been pretty constant?
Are you talking about the percentage of recycling
Right.
the town does?
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Yeah,
A little better.
I mean, we started off at 30% when we started this back in '08, and we're anywhere from 26 to 28%
Yeah.
percentage recycling.
Okay, yeah, and people know about it, so it isn't as if, you're gonna get a big spike, upwards, I mean, it is what it is.
The story I always tell when it comes to recycling contamination, and that's where we sometimes get whacked, is we always try to tell people to recycle appropriately, and, we put out all the messages, and the little ladies that wash out their sauce jars will go in and just scrub them really, really hard, and then the people that throw cat beds into their recycling bin, it's like, the message isn't getting there, and somebody else needs to figure out how to get that message out there. We have had a problem with batteries, some leading to fires in some of the trucks, improper disposal of batteries, but
Did
Like
we-
lithium ion batteries.
Yeah.
Did we see any reduction in the weight based on that, I know a smaller composting grant that we had, we did expect.
The pilot program here.
something, it's probably marginal.
Yeah.
Maybe it's cost neutral. The easier way to look at it, the challenge is that we can look at what we're giving Black Earth and say, great, it's 100 tons and therefore it's $10,000, whatever the numbers are, I'm making those numbers up. And that's great, but we can't say it's definitively being reduced from the waste stream, because there are these people who were throwing stuff out, or these people who are now consciously really taking what they were throwing out and recycling, or are they just trying to use Black Earth more. We've had our garbage disposal bylaw since the 50s in Norwood, so I think there's probably a lot of folks who are used to throwing stuff down the
Yeah.
drain, goes into the sewer. So to now say, gee, I got this old pot of soup, I did this the other night, throw it down the drain, do I now go and throw it in my little Black Earth composting bin? I think changing habits is hard. I don't think it's harmful. When that time frame is up, one of the things we might look at, and it's a big might, is people would have to go to paying for it.
Yeah.
But can we work a deal out with Black Earth Compost where they register with the town and we collect it through maybe the water sewer bill or something, or the electric bill, and pay that to Black Earth and get a discount for people by saying, look, we'll cut you one check a month instead of having to have 400 separate customers, always changing their credit card infos and everything. These costs are only gonna continue to go up. As landfill space gets filled up everywhere around the country, it gets harder and harder to transport it. Nobody wants incinerators. It's gonna continue to be a problem. I think, as everyone knows, we don't have a trash fee. Lots of towns do have trash fees. The challenge we would have is not only do folks think it's one of the nice things about paying your taxes in Norwood is that your trash is included, but theoretically by taking it out of the levy, it means that the commercial base is also sharing in that cost. So it's just a real screw job for the average residential taxpayer. Some of you might remember when we did the last override 6 years ago, we looked at, okay, if we did a trash fee versus if we did an override of the same amount, and the trash fee at the time needed to be like $220. We said, okay, well, if we did an override that raised property taxes $220, how much would that generate? And it generates so much more because you're able to hit the commercial base, so. Really no solution or answer there, just a story, I guess. Cemetery and parks maintenance, again, costs continue to climb in certain areas. We finally have some stability in the cemetery crew, which is helpful. Parks maintenance, relatively small increase in there. I know I did get a call from, I think, it might have been Alan a couple months ago, asking about contracted services that we use. Between facilities and DPW, we do use a number of landscaping companies. Some people remember, upwards of 20 years ago, the town took over maintenance of all the school fields. Though, they've kind of been gotten up to snuff, we have not added to our staffing since then. When we did shared facilities, we pulled a couple groundskeepers, we added some contracts for that. Those groundskeepers became craftsmen, just working with the facilities, with the trades folks. So we do spend a fair amount on landscaping services townwide, but I gotta tell you, the cost of a DPW employee salary and benefits is probably over $100,000 all in. We spent a couple $100,000 on landscaping contracts. I could not get that work done for the 2 or 3 people. It's not to say the DPW doesn't need more staff, they do, they've had the same level for a million years. But we get a better product out of it, we get more flexibility out of it. When we don't need to use them, we call them, and a skilled DPW employee can do far more than what a landscaping company can do. So, I mean, we still have our guys take care of the town common usually, because it's important to us that that look good. But, if we hire landscapers in-house, they can't go and do road work as well. So it's something that we can contract out, and I think works quite well for us. Just going through the staffing summaries again, one department that could certainly use some additional staff. The airport, as usual, coming in without anything really crazy. 2 full-time employees, operating budget pretty much the same. Not all that much goes on lately at the airport. They're just a source of capital projects and constant discussion, but they're doing well over there. Health department, you're seeing a little bit of a bigger increase here. We have been using ARPA funding to offset some of the full-time salaries here. That has completely gone away, so everything is 100% booked to the general fund. They've been offsetting part of the nurse's salary and the part of the animal control we use to offset as well. But
Yeah, I mean, when the inevitable question comes up at town meeting, as I think it should, is why that's such a big increase, you feel comfortable that you can justify, the positions and the type of work these people do,
absolutely.
okay?
The whole health department has, so you have Stacy, you have the assistant director, you have the admin, 2 inspectors, a nurse, and 2 animal control. And that's it. There's some additional grant funded positions, but that's the core of what the department does.
Mhm.
So we're able to use money over the years to offset some of those costs, and we did it. As we look at where we could allocate that money in the budget, I mean, some of those funds couldn't offset Jeff's salary, I couldn't offset Mary Lou's salary. If I could, we probably would have, but everything's 100% booked.
Did some positions come off last year as well? Because I've noticed the jump between 24 and 25 and now in another.
We started weaning it
jump.
off over the course of 2 years.
So that would account for the $200,000 increase? And that's
Okay.
2
Mhm.
positions, 3 positions?
2. I think with the Walpole, when we shared animal control with Walpole, we probably were not paying anything in a sense, because we were using grant funding to offset the whole half cost. That switched a little bit when we ended that and we dumped one whole body. And now we're not sharing it with Walpole, which is great.
But do you think from 24, it's more than 2 positions?
No. Other questions in the health department?
So those positions, like, in some cases, we've had things where we've had like grants and we brought in a new person because there was a
Yeah.
grant. But these positions that we're talking about now, were those positions that were in the budget
Yeah, so
prior to ARPA and we just used ARPA to offset our budget?
yes, we call it the second.
The distance there between,
We all want the sports updates. The second, we called nurse or sanitarian, we rotated based on what we were able to find. We brought on when COVID started, and started general funding, and we used some CARES Act money, and then that ran out, we were able to use ARPA money to fill that position. Because we realized there we were sort of lacking an inherent redundancy where one of those positions goes down and we have 0 services. Fortunately, the director being a nurse could back up the nurse if they went down, but we struggled to find them for a while. Animal control has always kind of been an amorphous blob. Years ago, it was just Henry, plus an absurd amount of overtime, plus a contract with Walpole to back up that they also paid us to back up, plus some per diem help. That morphed into, so it was always 1.5 to 2 based on what we were doing. We would always try to bring somebody on and they wouldn't stick around. That became a total of 3 when we were sharing with Walpole. And then as that ended, because it just didn't work for us, we're just sticking at 2 rather than going back to 1 and trying to pay somebody $30,000, $40,000 in overtime a year, with no redundancy built in. But when we got ARPA money, we looked at what in the health department we can use to offset our costs, and those were areas where we were able to offset our costs. It had to be health related, so that's really the only place we could use the money. Moving on to the Council on Aging. Bit of an increase here, similar reasons, twofold. We've been using some ARPA money and additional grant money to offset our part-time drivers, as well as one body that we added a couple of years ago that splits their time between transportation, which is coordinating the transportation, and I would call it outreach work. It's social work, but it's social assistance work, helping folks with some of their benefits and working with them through that process. We are down a full body in rec, so even though this, you could argue this is adding a body, town-wide, we're still neutral because we're not filling a full-time position at the rec department to accommodate this technical position increase here. That's the cause of the bulk of the increase for the senior center.
Is that a permanent change at the rec department?
I think it will be.
So you said the grant offset the part-time drivers and one other person?
Yeah, the
How
full
many
transportation.
part-time drivers do we have?
They're per diem pool, so it's to run the 3 part-time vehicles and then to back up Ellen. So we don't, they're not regular staffed part-time positions. They're per diem, we bring them in as we need them. We keep them under a benefited amount, but if they don't work, they don't get paid, so it's not like a regular part-time position.
Do we know how many, how often those,
We're usually
three
running
vehicles are used?
most of the time throughout, probably 4 days a week. I mean, I think the last time we looked at it, we're doing more than 1,000 rides in a given year. And we used to have the transfer program budgeted, some of you will remember that. There was $20,000 or $30,000 in there, and that's what sort of led to the senior medical transport program. Was the transfer program sort of collapsed and it was a mess. And cab service sort of disappeared in town. People used to be able to pay for a discounted cab ride, and it was just it was a mess.
There's no charge for these rides.
So that program costs all the part-time salary that we're looking at here is part of that ride program, and it part of the full-time salary?
Yeah.
And there's 10,000 in vehicle maintenance.
Right.
A part-time salary also has a program coordinator in it.
Is she
The
booked to
part-time
the
program
full,
coordinator.
is she booked to the full-time line though? I think she might be.
Nope, she's part-time.
Yeah, but she gets booked to the full-time line because it's benefited.
Okay,
I mean, I could be wrong, but usually we book them to the full-time line if they're benefited.
Well, I mean, the whole part-time line item here is just over $60,000, so it doesn't seem likely that that includes the coordinator and all the drivers.
Correct. Yeah, because the drivers probably call it 20 grand a year for how much they're driving. The medical rides also, the medical transfer program, it is medical rides, so it's not, the transfer program had a charge because some of it was, I want to go to the bar on Friday night. I don't think they were going to a bar on Friday night, but it was wherever they wanted to go. This is limited to medical transport. Which helps with the effectiveness of the van as well. The van is great for lunch, big programs, big trips and things like that. It's really not effective for medical trips. We'd probably hold this program here if we did have the hospital back, but without the hospital, there's a desire to expand it further. We can barely keep up with the demand that we have. I think we've done 2 program evals of it. Looking at it every time. The first time we did it, we were surprised to find how many of the users are actually not necessarily in the lower income bracket that you think they are, that they can't drive. It's folks who physically have no other option because they just don't have any family around. They're still not higher income seniors, but it's not just folks who don't drive because they can't drive. It's folks who had a medical issue, maybe they broke a leg, and they just need a ride to the doctor. I'm saying that we found that was surprisingly something where it was, hey, I have a car I could drive, but I can't. So we find that the need there is significant. The number of folks who are attending things like, again, we actually had a study published in a journal about the whole program. We found that the number of people who are doing either mental health visits or physical therapy, something we never anticipated because they want some privacy with their family members and they don't want to ask their kids to bring them. Physical therapy, gets extensive. And then there were folks we surveyed who said, look, I wanted to see a therapist, I didn't want my kids to know, and I want my sister to know, or my brother to know, so I want to take advantage of the opportunity. So I think one of the first estimates we did, there's probably hundreds of medical appointments that still get missed and that were getting missed because there's no option for a lot of these seniors in town. Other questions for the COA?
And if we had a hospital, it would be better.
160 million%. I mean, one of the things we wanted to be able to do is offer, for instance, companion service to Boston. If you have to go in for a surgery, you just don't have anyone around to take you. We want to be able to make sure we can take care of these seniors. We want people to stay in their homes. The cheapest thing for society is for seniors to be able to stay in their homes. We really can't accommodate that. We're just struggling to get people to dialysis. I mean, Carrie was telling me there's one guy that we bring dialysis sometimes a couple times a week. He's in a wheelchair. His cost to have a private company transport him is $500. So it's not like we're just, not just a free car ride, it's life-saving in some cases. And particularly with the problems we're having for fire and EMS, the more we can make sure seniors are getting out and getting to their medical appointments, it's keeping it from becoming a bigger problem down the road. Veteran services, no significant change, actually due to staff change in here, a slight decrease. Just by perpetual reminder that operating cost is based on sort of what we're looking at. It goes up, it goes down, but it's a commodity cost. If we have more veterans on the 115 program, that number would go up to accommodate that actual cost. We do receive 3/4 of that number back from the state, so it's not an entire loss, if you will.
Is this the amount, is this the 25% or is this the 100%?
So we have to book the full cost.
Yep.
So a 115 program is, the direct relief right there. That's what we get 75% of. Sometimes these other numbers, depending on how they're calculated, the state sometimes plays games with you, sometimes they don't.
So we budget the full cost and we get reimbursed back and it goes to free cash.
Goes to local receipts.
Local receipt, yeah.
Okay.
When you break down the
Yeah.
when you break down the UGGA, the unrestricted general government aid, it's the main amount, and then there's always a number in there that says, vets BS, or BS exemptions for veterans, and that number should roughly target 75% of what we're expending.
So it's offset by revenue, okay.
What's frustrating with the state is, they don't really pre-approve, we try to get them to pre-approve, so, Sarah comes in and says, I'm a veteran, I'm qualifying for this, we say, okay, it looks like you are, we have to then submit it and pay them, and then the state 6 months later says, yeah, no, she's good, we'll actually reimburse you for it, but if we miss something, or they just decide that they interpret something differently, you end up getting stuck sometimes, but why they can't have a more easy system or a centralized system is beyond me, but getting here. Veteran services. Moving on to the library, no significant changes here, other than we've added a portion of the cost for the CFCE grant into the budget. That's about half paid by the grant itself, and we've gotten some money from the housing authority to pay for it. So that accounts for, I think there's $15,000 in there to make sure we can cover that salary. Some part-time wage adjustments as well were needed. The library used to have some part-time benefited positions that have been reduced and converted to full-time over time. But it is one of our larger departments at close to $2 million. But other than that, there's no actual changes. We do, I should have mentioned with the senior center, we get a something like $11 or $12 per senior as sort of a block grant every year from the state. The library also receives, I think it's around $60,000, it might be a little bit less, funding from the state that they're allowed to use on different programs and everything. So some of these smaller departments do get statutory grant funding going along with.
Is that based on the number that use the facility?
For the library?
And
No, the senior center is just based on total number of seniors in your community. It's something like $12 per person over a certain age.
Okay.
So I don't know, the senior living facility moves in, we get a little bit of money, it's not a whole lot, but it's what lets Carrie offset the cost of lunches and provide a lot of services. It provides a lot of the, some of the offset for the vehicle costs and the maintenance and the drivers. So that money goes right back into the same programming. Same thing with the library, it's a statutory formula. We're supposed to either increase our library consistent with other departments or not decrease it more than other departments to continue to receive that funding. We've always been able to do that, and even some cases where the libraries come in low or flat, we make the argument that the benefits are not shown in the budget, but you can't tell us that the budget's only gone up 1%, because here's health insurance, and if we really want to throw all that in, we could.
The senior center is open to people regardless of where they live, right? Like, it's not just for Norwood seniors.
Correct.
The medical transport program,
That's a Norwood program.
okay.
Yeah. that's not something we could, accommodate out-of-town residents for, especially with some of our neighbors having quite a bit of more money than we do. That's a Norwood program. Libraries are open to everyone. Moving on to recreation, you're seeing a change here for a couple of reasons. One, we have deleted a full-time position, and some of that was booked to the, it's not a layoff, the position was vacant. We used to not have an assistant director going back even 6 or 7 years. We added it about 7 years ago. Just hasn't necessarily worked out, so we're pulling it back. We think we'll be fine the way we are. We've moved some of the part-time salaries into the revolving fund, which is a little bit more correct accounting, that's what we should be paying out of the revolving fund, as opposed to a portion of a full-time salary, but we have backed that full-time salary out. Assuming we can get enough lifeguards, which is a big assumption.
I was just gonna ask about that.
Both pools will open if we have enough lifeguards. And the pools obviously is some of the cost increase, there is a revenue offset for that. We're not making any major predictions with Haas, no one knows how successful it's gonna be, how busy it's gonna be. But we'll give it a good old college try.
Can we talk a little bit about just the status of the Haas project, where we're at, what the schedule is?
Looking like it's gonna open on time.
That's a good thing.
Yep, so we're hopeful it will be. I think they're hauling the dirt array this week according to Mike. And we're picking the mural design for the, the pump room, so it's supposed to be going along on schedule.
Mural design for the pump room?
Sorry, not the pump room, the wall outside the pump room. The end of the pool
Oh,
faces
okay.
just the blank concrete, so probably just gonna say the word Norwood in blue and yellow, 'cause I think
Okay.
there's only $2,000
We have
worth of
great-
Why we needed a
great
mural
art
for.
department.
Yeah.
And the high school.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you know what's cheap is a blue coat with yellow letters, so that's probably what we're going for. We're on,
The maintenance account in
yeah, I mean, there's
the.
increased
Father
cost with,
Max.
listen,
Sorry.
I couldn't increase that amount enough to take care of Father Max. No, that's reflecting that we'll have 2 pools open. Father Max is probably candidly nearing the end of its life cycle. It's costly, it is, got a lot of problems. It's gonna limp along this year, and then I think the selectmen at some point, I don't wanna speak for them, but they're probably gonna have a, real serious thought process about what the future of Father Max is, because the pool itself, the pump infrastructure and the equipment is dated, falling apart, needs a lot of work. The bathhouse, I think one day is just gonna fall into itself. Normally I'd say let's not even really run with it this year, but we're getting Haas open, it's gonna be new, there's gonna be some challenges there. Getting the chemical mix right, learning to operate new pool, new system. But I would say that, Father Max at some point needs to be a focus of a much deeper discussion on what we're going to, be able to do long-term there.
Yes.
Certainly, I would never wanna close a facility until we're ready to move forward with what's going to replace it, cause then we're stuck with an abandoned building in a hole. But at some point, the repair cost is just not gonna make sense for what we need to do. And then if you're talking about a replacement, we spent $1 million in the bathhouse at Haas and $5 million in the pool. I just don't know that that's in the,
More than 5.
5.5 million, I think, but,
With some grant money.
yeah. So, it's just been a lot, and I don't think we're looking at doubling that investment. And unfortunately, other alternatives, spray park or something like that, or spray park that can do ice in the winter, you're probably looking north of that $5-6 million cost, so it's just not necessarily in the,
Well,
in
it's
the
just
realm.
something to consider with all the other things
Yeah.
that we have to consider.
This summer will be good to really look at the numbers and see, between Haas and Father Max and how many folks are each using each pool and.
Well,
what
and
the
also if you
impact
get
on the
lifeguards,
community.
that's the other.
Well, if we don't get lifeguards, we wanna have
Yeah.
Father Max open,
I mean,
that's always a challenge,
yeah.
but.
Makes a decision.
Yeah, I mean, then you get, you have to look at the impacts if you do give up one pool, what that means for the different programs you have.
Yeah, and that's why it's a little bit more complicated than just 1 or 2 units. It's not a McDonald's restaurant where it's, go down from 10 units to 9. There's that revenue factor into it. Would we lose revenue? Would we lose passes? Does it impact camps? Would it impact the camp numbers? So it's a
Yeah.
complicated discussion, but it's,
That's worth $5-6 million. I mean, that's the question when everything is said and done, so.
right. And then it's much smaller, so you wouldn't replace it that size. Are we gonna start taking field? It's a complicated process.
Okay.
Our celebrations line, unfortunately, flat. There's always pressure on these lines. It's important to note that things like the 4th of July parade, they still raise probably $30,000 or $40,000. So most of these items in here don't even really cover the full cost of an event. It would be nice to be in a place where we knew we could have the event, and if the fundraising had a problem, we would be safe, but most of these rely on significant private fundraising to happen.
This doesn't include, I assume, or doesn't, fireworks, before Norwood Day.
No, that was always donated.
Okay, because it's still, I'm not sure what the situation is gonna be at the middle school. I suspect that, because of some of the other work that's going on there, it may be difficult next year, fall of '25, I should say, to be able to do fireworks there.
I would agree, we're probably gonna wanna wait until the existing building is down, and we sort of know what the site looks like and where it is, and then we'd have to make sure that the donor would want to continue doing it.
Yeah.
We tried to get them to shift it elsewhere, but, once
Yeah.
it's 3 years, 4 years, no fireworks, it becomes a little
Yeah.
difficult. I know the police department loved fireworks at the, Coakley, so I'm sure they'll want to be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I was hoping for fireworks when they demolished the Coakley.
Stick them in there.
Let me see if I can fit
I want to
that
save
in.
some of the bricks and sell them for the Bernie Cooper Scholarship Fund. So,
Yes,
we might be able to do that. Maybe we can do like a last hurrah at the Coakley, similar to what they did at the high school.
There was actually some talk about that, and, I can't imagine more than 12 people will be willing to come up to that.
But there's
What
a
do I
difference
know?
between a very much, we're sad to see you go versus thank God you're going.
I mean,
Happy wake or whatever, Irish wake. I guess.
basically, that's correct, yeah.
This summary here is just something that I think Jeff has provided you something similar, just summarizing some of the major single line item increases for operating expenses. I actually like the report Jeff put together showing it by major category. So we've sort of gone through this again, it's just where some of these items are, and what's sort of contractual and what's not. In that discussion of a contractual increase, we always talk about it related to personnel costs, but sometimes when it's things like munis or something, it's a contractual cost that just software's gone up, there's not much we can do, the cost of the audit's an example. We've mostly covered this just understanding our contractual obligations. COLA adjustments are from 2 to 2.5 in this budget. Our step increases are between 2.75 and 3 1/4. It averages 3, but sometimes they're up and down a little bit. Public safety is a little bit different. It's a broader range, but fewer step increases. As I always complain about some things that are unmet, software needs are increasing, or software costs are increasing. Acquiring new software is becoming very difficult. Again, an example of something like Diligent, if we wanted to say, hey, we think we want new software for the agenda, it's $30,000. So it's becoming very difficult to acquire software that we need. I wanted a GIS position for many, many years. Still has not happened. Probably will never happen, but I'm gonna keep asking. Additional IT staff is an area where between the towns and the schools, we sort of do what we need to do to get by, but there's no extra ability or capacity there. And again, our professional services are generally underfunded compared to peer communities, so that's when the schools have the same problem. They wanna do a $40,000 study, and it's like, there's just not enough flexibility in there to do a study that's $40 or $50 or $60,000. We don't have an EMD. We also don't have a solid waste or recycling manager. We talked to the town of Sharon about, is there a way we could share a part-timer? We love working with the town of Sharon. Other towns not so much, but Sharon's very easy to work with. And as I said, our community events remain underfunded. I talked before about what additional staffing would look like. At the low end, this is roughly what 4 firefighters would cost, about $400,000. You're not factoring in the requisite pension and health insurance costs there. So if we were to try to add enough firefighters to add, let's say, an ambulance 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, you'd probably either need 4 or 8. So you're looking at approaching that $1 million cost. An ambulance to add 1 firefighter 24/7, you need about 4 bodies. So if we said we want to add 3 guys per crew, so we have an additional 3 firefighters at any given time, you're looking at 12 bodies. Again, you're looking at $1.5 million or more. We did present this to the Board of Selectmen, just giving an idea of where the budget would go if instead of going up roughly that 5.5%, we went down in whole percentage points, what you would see for potential cuts at dropping another $400,000. Some of the softer stuff would end up getting cut, but you'd start to see digging into staff salaries, which creates an issue. Some of these items are things that might just crop back up, we would just be taking a risk. As you go further, we start to have to get into cutting bodies and cutting part-time and full-time positions just because there's not a lot else there in the budget. I mean, I'd love to take a hatchet to the IT budget, but we're gonna need email next year, we're gonna need phones next year, and we unfortunately need munis next year as well. As you continue to go on, each additional percentage point with that extra roughly $400,000 is gonna start to result in positions. There's just nowhere else to make those adjustments. Now, that doesn't mean that if we cut out a pool, that might be some money here. One of the things I think I explained at, to the selectmen at their meeting is, as a process for looking forward, how we're gonna deal with next year's deficit, you need to take that outside the budget process a bit, because how you would get there and what you would do at the last minute are two different things, and trying to have all those discussions in the context of the budget. Well, sure, I'm gonna not pay an insurance policy for something one year and take a risk and not lay off a body. What you do to pay your bills at the end of the month, because you have to, is different than what you would do when you're budgeting, and we do the same thing. And that's why sometimes we get accused of, oh, you know, the sky is falling, and then you find a way to fix it. We fix it by doing bad things. You know, nobody should put their grocery bill on their credit card at the end of the month, but if you have a choice between buying food or putting your grocery bill on the credit card, what do? You put it on the credit card. So we get to budget season, and that's what we do, we find ways to get through. But some of these discussions, I know what Bob's gonna pitch is, we probably start sometime in a few weeks, and, you know, look at what a, I don't wanna use the word level funded, look at what a no offset budget next year would look like. After 3 or 4 months, just a small team, like one person from each board, and Tim and I, and then Jeff, because we need somebody to do the work. And what that will look like, knowing that the actual picture will be different, because you're pulling and scraping here and there, and you're borrowing furniture instead of buying whatever you have to do, but that maybe by August or September, we can say, this is what we'd be looking at, well ahead of the actual budget season, which has its own complexity and work to it, to just get things through.
Well, we've given a similar speech to the school department when we met with them, and, you know, we're funding the budget, you know, with one-time money, which is fiscally, long-term, it's fiscally responsible. I think everybody understands that. It's good that you're gonna try to put a group together to see what the implications are if we don't fund, you know, money, fund the budgets using, basically this, what's there, you know, quote-unquote, our means, and we'll see how things come out.
Right.
Because I doubt next year, FY '27, we're gonna have sufficient free cash to be able to fund the budget. No, even if we do, should we? Because I think that's just kicking the can down the road.
Right.
Well, I think that's the last year we could, if we needed to fund it at the same level, we not, it's unlikely we would have the same.
Yeah,
Right, with the increase in health insurance that came in after the BBC met, we're looking at roughly $8 million in one-time monies to offset this budget. So you were showing cuts there, you know, 1 or 2%. We'd have to be bigger than that in order to
Right, we're looking at, you know,
absorb $8 million. I mean, it wouldn't all be general government, but general
Right.
government would have to do more than 1.7 million, right, if we're gonna have an $8 million reduction.
yeah, I mean, if you spread it out roughly based on where we spend the money, you're looking at $3 million from shared cost and facilities, and I don't know that we can take it from shared costs. Again, we can't just say pay less for the pension.
Yeah.
If you break it up roughly a third based on how we spend, yeah, you're looking at some significant dollars.
well, that's what the voters have to know, and, you know, when they make a decision, or will be asked to make a decision.
Well, I think it's important to note too, which we've all discussed at this table, is that the lines going up are people. And it's
Always,
the
yeah.
people, right? And it looks to me, based on just going back over the past few years, it's about 6% in each, overall. I mean, it has its fluctuations, obviously, but it's about an average of 6%, and 6%, 2.5%, but, and
Doesn't work.
increases in
That-
insurance, it's a
Doesn't
very
Yeah.
simple mathematical
Yeah, and-
issue, so, I mean, it's going to take it's going to take a group having to look at it and really pull things apart that they don't have time to do during the budget season.
And we always, in the budget season, we shoot ourselves in the foot. Higher downs are a perfect example. If
Mhm.
we had every department budgeted at the full amount for a salary, then a 2% COLA really means 2%. If salaries are only going up 2.5%, you could really do it, but what do? Yes, 4 new employees, I've saved $70,000, it gets me through over here. And it's a little bit bigger on the school side, where a senior teacher and a brand new teacher, it's a bit of a bigger gap, but it's the same thing here. Hey, clerk's office is only up 1% because a senior employee left and somebody else came in. The best fiscal practice would be, nope, you have 4 positions, it's a salary of max of this, budget for all that, but we never have that flexibility. So as a result, everyone's getting a step and everyone's getting a COLA, and that's why it grows at that level, and you wait until everyone's at the top step, then it's just a COLA, but then people leave and the cycle starts again.
But
I
then
don't know
an
if there's no
interesting
solution.
exercise to look at how much it would cost to budget that way.
I-
It would be huge,
Oh, absolutely, I've always wanted to calculate the actual number,
yeah?
and again, it can't be perfect, but it'd be nice to know what it actually is. Again, on the school side, the problem is you got a a teacher starts at $50,000 and 12 years later they're at $90,000, but what's that number? Because that's one of the things that kills us with trying to say, we have to grow at 3%. You hope every time somebody goes up a step, there's somebody else who's at the top that didn't, so maybe it's only 1.5, or you've hired somebody at a lower level. It doesn't always work that way. There's no easy solution. This is, I think, the last slide I had just on the horizon, just reminding everyone that, you know, the implementation of the master plan might require funding for some initiatives. We are undergoing a public safety staffing study. I think it's gonna say realistically we have to look at our fire staffing.
What's the timeline on that study?
Oh, should have been done 9 months ago. The Collins Center is working on it. Hopefully soon.
When you say public safety, is that police as well as
Police and
fire?
fire, yeah.
Okay.
Police staffing's probably fine.
Not according to standard staffing levels.
No, it's probably good. Capital needs, as we know, we still have aging infrastructure. Later I can talk about town hall, because I know we're here to talk about the operating budget. At some point, stormwater and the downtown streetscape are some of the other things that are starting to crop up that we're gonna need to have a discussion on. And last year, the municipal employee empowerment bill was possibly gonna give us some additional revenue enhancements. It didn't go through. I have no idea if it's gonna go through this year. I had put something positive on there, so. I
My
put
cost
that
of
on there.
dispatch is hitting next year too.
Yeah, we start paying for that next year, yeah.
In terms of potential revenue enhancements, I mean, it's nice to get additional revenue, but the reality is it just on the margins more than anything
For the most
else.
part,
But
yeah.
every little bit helps.
Yeah, I mean, no question.
Just like with
Yeah.
expenses, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Every little bit of revenue helps.
right, and so that's why we need to, you know, look at fees and all that kind of stuff, like review all of this and figure out what are options to bring in even small amounts of revenue.
Other questions on the general government budget? I think we still have most department heads here.
I don't think so. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have one question for the two chiefs.
Oh, okay.
Or a comment. The question is how many, we had census a couple of years ago that our numbers went up. Did our
Population-wise.
population-wise,
Yep.
have we been able to keep up with that with our safety departments?
So the census recorded a population of 31,000.
I thought
We
so.
were at 31,000 back in the early 70s. The population has changed, but our call volume is really what the challenge is. And as you heard the chief say, the call volume is up. I don't know if it's necessarily related to an increase in population on paper, because again, the call volume was just fundamentally less with only a couple of thousand people different 10 years ago. It's just, and you're seeing this not just in Norwood, so it's not like, wow, we're getting a whole lot of EMS calls and everyone else is down. It's throughout eastern Massachusetts,
And it's
whatever.
Norwood is much busier than the surrounding
Yeah.
towns, though.
What's that?
Norwood is much busier than the surrounding towns for that type of
Is
thing.
that because of the daytime population versus
It,
that?
it is,
night?
we're also, 51% rentals, so
Yeah.
we get more on that. I mean, I think the police department did 42 or 48,000 calls for service last year, 113 a day, 4.6 or 8 per hour. That's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So, that could be a 5-minute call or it could be a 2-hour, robbery investigation. And there's more and more of that. Just think about traffic in town and what it's like and what it's changed from what it used to be. Norwood is not a small town, it's a small city.
Yeah.
So we're seeing more and more of that. And you're seeing, just look at the differences that we're seeing with, tearing down small houses and building 10, 20, 30 apartments, we're gonna see more and more of that. So I think that's gonna increase, which is gonna increase our call volume consistently.
I mean, you listed certain numbers that you have, a daily basis, hourly basis. Again, is that number going up from what it has been in previous years?
I think so. Yeah, overall, I haven't looked at it from year to year, but just in general, just what we're dealing with, our guys are busy. They're busier.
Or maybe different types of calls that they have?
There's a lot of that, and we sit back and, so over at Holbrook, Norwood Police and Norwood Fire, the two busiest towns at Holbrook,
Okay.
by far. You'd agree with that, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, You know, Stoughton's over there, and Stoughton's a, you know, probably about equivalent size police, but they're just not as busy as we are.
Okay.
Just something going on here. We're just centrally located for a lot of stuff, Route 1, all of that, it adds up.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Can we get a hard copy of that for our next meeting? Can somebody give us that? Can you mail it?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, I mean, that's a lot of pages, I hate to copy that many.
We're trying to cut budgets, so we're trying to stop copying paper.
I'll provide you paper,
Yeah, somebody complained last week, they said, dude, Jeff wants to go all digital. I said, fine.
yeah.
Charge for bunch books.
I didn't say that out loud.
Yeah,
Did I say that for $10 a piece?
yeah.
For the honor of being a, person that's representing your neighborhoods, yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
That's all I want.
Yeah, we wanna,
Okay.
we definitely will put in $10 each, how's that?
Suggested donation.
People on Senate town meeting like you're at some Fenway Park, some program. Peanuts, budget books?
We can sell ads in them.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything, yeah, it's okay.
I still think if we got one day for license, it would go a lot faster and we raise
Yep. We might have to hold the meeting somewhere outside the school, but. All right, the next item on our agenda is long-term budget planning. So, you know, Tony, you started a little bit of that conversation. I think, you know, we, as a committee, have been very interested in trying to figure out how to make best use of this windfall in free cash. And obviously, we think that, you know, it makes sense to put some towards the operating budget. We've talked about, you know, supporting, adding to the special education reserve. We had talked about maybe needing snow and ice, but it's nice to hear Mark Ryan say he doesn't think he's gonna need it,
Yeah,
and
if
he
we
knows
do,
spring
it's,
is coming.
yeah, if we do, it's a small amount. It's
Yeah.
we kind of skated by one more storm, and we probably would have.
Right, so,
Still March.
If you'd like, I did spend some time talking with Jeff, and I had a meeting with Alan. I can get you something by the end of the week to kind of start the discussion about what we're looking to put in and where do we want to put it, and how does that tie into some future capital expenses.
Let me just ask, the general purpose reserve fund, there's a process for taking money out, right? We only want to do it if something extraordinary happens.
General
Right.
stabilization fund.
Yes.
Right, we'd only want to take it out for something like in the middle of the school year, we lose our grant fund.
Correct.
And we, okay, we take it out of that. That would have to be a town meeting vote, right? And it's, is it two-thirds?
Two-thirds, yes.
Two-thirds,
To take
okay.
that out, yes.
If we were to leave money in free cash and we had that situation, we'd still have to go to town meeting, but it would only be a majority vote, right?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to- I've been thinking about, it would be good, you know, we want to have all these options on the table, but on the other hand, the more you put something in something specific, the less flexibility you have. And if
Right.
things are truly very uncertain, do you want to have any kind of restriction, or do you want to keep yourself realistic, so you can see and say, okay, it's just sitting in free cash, it'll be for whatever it needs to be, we have no idea.
That does give us
It
flexibility.
does give you a lot of flexibility.
It also means that,
It's fair game, yeah.
right, right,
That's,
you know,
that's the trade-off, but.
the risk, the other risk that you run doing that is just that, you know, kind of the first cause that asks for the money is
Right.
gonna be more likely to get the
Right.
money rather than like necessarily the most
And then
important
the next,
pressing
you know,
thing.
2 months later, the bridge down in South Norwood collapses.
Right, right. I mean, you do have also the putting it in, take it right back out kind of problem, which is potentially, yeah, but go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I guess along those lines, and I know these are capital funds, but there was a vote taken at town meeting related to the Forbes money. Was that just the intent of town meeting? Where does that $6 million sit?
In an account known as a real estate receipts reserved, I think it was clear that that was for Forbes Hill, for Forbes Hill.
I understand for
The
open
costing fund.
space.
Yeah.
Because
We
only
never
because-
mentioned
No,
the
it was
cost
not
response.
part, it was
We mentioned a 25-acre parcel adjacent to
We
the highway.
mentioned open space is what.
open space,
was-
is what it was voted on. So, but my question is, we've honored that and haven't touched that. So, to his point, We have honored that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in a separate account, like,
Cause it has to be.
okay.
I
just,
but we, that could be used for things that, the rule is it has to go for something that's like, what, 25-year term or
That
something
we
like
would
that?
otherwise borrow for, yeah, or land
Yeah.
or property acquisition.
Yeah, so, you couldn't use that for operating expenses, but you could potentially use it for some of the other things on the capital.
no, but what I was talking about is we've honored the intent of that.
Yes.
If we were to leave something in free cash, I wasn't talking about how to spend that
Even though it's
money.
not a special.
I am just saying,
yeah.
it's not in something that's necessarily difficult for it to get out of if we felt like we needed capital money for something.
Right. But the problem with our current
we've
free
honored the
cash is that we
town meeting
haven't
vote.
had a discussion about
Right.
how we want to earmark it, right? It doesn't I agree with you, it doesn't necessarily have to be formally in a stabilization fund that's gonna
Exactly,
take 2/3 vote, but I think it's important to have the
You need
conversation.
almost a plan to say,
So
okay,
that we
this
could
is for
have
this,
the
this is
direct
for that.
intent of the money if everybody thinks.
Right.
that it's-
One thought I had just, and again, I started committing it to writing, and just haven't finished it yet, because it's been a busy couple of weeks with the hospital. We generated about $29 million in free cash. Obviously, we have nowhere near that, as everyone knows, between capital and what we're offsetting the budget with. We're down to maybe 10 million, there might be some other smaller articles. We put, we did take $2 million and put it into stabilization, we did sort of that Forbes workaround, but forget about that, because that doesn't really count,
Right.
that's just us doing what we need to do.
Okay.
You take we put $1 million in compensated absences in November. We target a total of 2.9 million, that's a 10% savings rate on the total amount. That gives us 1.9 million at this town meeting, that if we said, okay, we're gonna put it away in these different areas, at least then we can say out of the total free cash that we got, 10% went into the bank, 2 million was just a whatever transaction. This amount went to capital, this amount went to offsetting the budget, which is not ideal, but, that's the situation we're in. And then that still leaves us $5 to $7 million in free cash going into next year, which, let's say we have a good free cash year, we generate another 5 million. We're starting off with 10 or 11, that sounds great, except there's 5 or 6 already for capital, depending on what we need, we haven't made those decisions, but some of them we're gonna need to do. And then we're gonna need to try to offset the budget, it's gonna be a tough budget year, so at least that we can represent to the rating agencies, look, we saved 10% right off the bat, I think it's a good number, town meeting would understand it. That 1.9 million, maybe, we don't need to put a lot into compensated absence, if we put any more in, my suggestion would be 350,000. That between what's in the budget, more or less covers what we draw down for a year, so it gives the fund another year to grow. Give it every year, if we have a little bit money in, we throw it in to offset that number, to let the fund balance grow until we can get that operating budget number up to an average year. Maybe put $500,000 in a special ed stabilization, because we've always had that, I think there's $500,000 or $600,000 in there. But, it's always like, well, we gotta use it, so there's no point in putting money in the bank where the second you have to use it, it's all gone. So let's actually have enough of a cushion in there that if we had to use it, we could use it without being like, well, crap, it's all gone. With $500,000 in there, we get a $350,000 expense, it's like, we might as well take it all out, what are you leaving a couple dollars in there?
They haven't withdrawn anything from that money account yet.
No, I understand, but sometimes the challenge with there being so little money in there.
Oh,
it's
I'm
like if-
in favor of increasing it,
Yeah, if we
absolutely.
use it, it almost creates a disincentive to use it, because it's, well, there's only $500,000, we don't wanna drain it by, 70%, it's like, well, we set it up to use it, let's use it. If we put another $500,000 in it, not that I want us to use it if we don't need to, but at least we can use it without closing it out. And then that leaves $1 million on the table, we could either do regular stabilization, which is always good, or put it into the pension fund, and again, we can do a pension reserve trust and try to time the market correctly to make some money off that, because that liability's only gonna continue to go up.
I'd like to see an analysis of, if we were to contribute an extra $1 million now.
What do we think it would do, and what would it?
Yeah, would it really,
Contribute to the pension system,
yeah,
not gonna make a material difference, that's why
Yeah.
this million is kind of just on the side,
right.
to potentially, again, either contribute at one point, as Tony said, or offset future costs.
But there were
Again.
other requests too, right? One more.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd like to see the numbers. You're gonna present something
You
showing.
always prove them at night when I'm spitting them out here, rough, 300 for this, 400 for this, that doesn't,
No, that just goes in one ear and out the other most of the time, but in any event, what I'd like to see is, you do the analysis, showing, this is what we have now, if we spend blah, 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 we're gonna have this much left over, we're gonna get some additional free cash, in the fall of next year, what this number really means, because my own personal opinion is, we're not putting enough money into reserves. I don't think that the amount of money my personal opinion, the amount of money you're putting in the reserves is enough. I think we have to put more into funds, whether it's a capital fund, whether it's a fund for compensated absences, whether it's general stabilization. However, I think that more money should be put in, because I wouldn't go with the assumption that next year we're simply gonna fund a budget deficit using free cash again. I think that's a thing, and again, if we said the same thing to the schools, I think that's that's dangerous to think that that's how we're gonna get out of the budget situation
We're not
we
gonna have
have.
it. I mean, listen, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think we're gonna generate $15 million.
No, but I mean, but again, depending upon how we look budget-wise, that could impact how we look at capital in the fall also. I mean, I'd like to pay capital with free cash if we can. It lowers the amount of money which we have as a shared cost, for debt service, so it's always good to do that. But I don't know how much we're gonna have available, so.
Well, and how much is coming off capital, so we can,
Right,
that's.
right, so
Right.
it's good to see the numbers, so then we have, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, at least there's something we have in front of us that we can comment on.
It starts a conversation.
Yeah,
Our trouble with this, having this conversation now, is that a week from tonight, we've been invited to Board of Selectmen to talk about our requests for the town meeting warrant. 'Cause
I think they might be asking you to just delay that for a meeting.
okay,
I'm not sure, but I have a feeling the way the agenda's popping up for next week, it might be give it a little bit of time to sort of work it out.
okay.
No guarantee, but that's
So how long would it take to get something like this in front of us?
a couple days.
Well, we're meeting again Thursday.
I will have it by Thursday,
Okay, great.
okay.
That would be great.
if not before.
Okay.
Lots of meetings to choose from.
Yes.
Can we have it emailed to us, even if it's like right before the meeting?
No, but I
Yes.
just
It's more fun if he just springs it on us,
No.
Nope.
Not,
Not for us, but for him.
Yeah. And Jeff, where are you in this?
I'm even telling you it ahead of time, instead of saying, yep, all sounds good, guys, and then just showing up and being like, here's a new idea, so, there's a little bit of notice. You're not gonna take time off.
Next, on Thursday, we're meeting with facilities at 6, and then Blue
Blue
Hills.
Hills, yeah.
I don't know what time we,
Seven.
you
I
told me
think it's
7.
at 7.
Okay. I don't know that facilities is gonna take us a full hour,
I don't
so we
think so
can
either.
have a little bit of a conversation in there. I mean, if Blue Hills is here early, we can take them early, but we certainly will wait till 7 for them if we need to, but we can have some of this conversation between facilities and Blue Hills if necessary. And then, the other thing is, at some point, we're gonna have to adjust some of the shared costs, right, to reflect the new health insurance and things like that.
Yeah, potentially, again, I've done the first initial, and we're pretty close.
Okay,
So I don't think we're gonna need, the 400,000 that we're talking about, probably not gonna need that much.
okay,
So just adjusting that, anticipating the new hires, and then I put a little buffer on top of that, I think we're gonna be within the $100,000 to $200,000 range.
okay,
And again, that's gonna be bare bones, that's not gonna be returning any money to OPEB at the end of the year, most likely, so.
okay.
Yeah, just find out what they're drinking in Medway, so maybe we can go up the amount of money, the percentage that they do.
So you should see the amount we have to pay for a water treatment plant, so maybe it's the new water.
Used to be what I did for a living. Actually, it's more the other side, but that's
All right. Other topics for discussion, anything else we wanna talk about?
I might be submitting a reserve fund transfer in the next couple of weeks, just for some hospital campaign-related expenses. But that's still TBD.
We haven't touched our reserve fund yet this year, right? And it's 175,000?
Yeah, we haven't touched it this year, I don't think we did anything last year.
No.
It's been a while.
Okay, good.
One thing that's, we haven't seen as much as we have in the past, your municipal relief. So again, if you do have municipal relief, we'd like to see those.
We'll try to get them early, I think we'll be, I know we have one office that we've had a long time, we've had to put some temp staffing, because we've had a long time, somebody out on illness. Other than that, I don't think there's any that,
Nothing that's popping up right now.
Okay.
people always run in at the last minute, they're like, oh, by the way, we have a bill for $28,000, but.
Okay.
Is there funding for the hospital campaign in next year's budget?
No, because I don't wanna say we don't know what we're gonna spend, but it's not like I need $200,000 because this is what we're doing, it's just for the first few months and to go forward into next year, we know these are some expenses we've incurred and these are some things we're gonna wanna pay for, but it's sort of, take it by, we're sort of building this plane as we're flying it.
Do you have a consulting firm, which I'm assuming you have a contract, so that, no?
We haven't hired a
Okay.
consultant firm.
Okay.
No, I mean, we have like a data analyst that we're using to crunch some of our EMS numbers, but that's $10,000-$12,000. The website costs a little bit of money, there's some marketing money, council's had to do a couple of things. Those are what we're looking at. It might be that, if we do something now, we don't need to do something for another year. Now the task force, as they get organized, might come up with an idea for something that they need to do. We'd have to look at that and see how we do it and see how we spread the cost, but this is mostly, sort of some startup costs.
So as the hospital's being built, I assume the assessors reassess them every year, so the value's going up.
I mean, the problem was the previous building was underassessed, but it was assessed at around $44 million. The full plan includes the full hospital, a garage, and an outpatient service building. What they're finishing now is the shell of the existing building.
I understood. I'm just thinking that, trying to work out in my mind, that the best case scenario for the town would be to have the for-profit entity complete the full hospital 100%, and then sell it to a nonprofit, at which point it comes off the tax rolls,
Right,
and that value gets distributed around the rest of the town.
it does.
We then negotiate a pilot with nonprofit entity, which goes as additional other receipts, not on the levy.
Correct.
So it's in essence generating more revenue if you do it that way.
In a
So
sense, it is.
The longer they
It's a
take
great
to
tax
get them, to move it from for-profit to nonprofit, the better we do.
Yeah.
That's something to think about, so.
Not that I think we want to try to delay.
No,
right?
no.
If there's some
Yeah. Not to
nonprofit who
delay
wants to take it
progress.
over right now, we would go for it.
Yeah, not delaying progress, just delaying the transfer from for-profit to nonprofit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Are there any other, like, items that are going to, free cash requests that will be coming before May town meeting?
The HR onboarding software is one. I think we'll have that ready to go. It may not, we may have to wait till this, till the fall. I don't think there's anything else on the early draft warrant.
No.
I can send out tomorrow, because I'll say I'll do it tomorrow, the warrant in its current shape, as long as nobody says, oh my God, you're doing X, it's literally the assembly of things on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I mean, I have one board member who always says, no, I just wanna see it early, I won't create a problem. And then I get a call, this is the first I've heard of this, why is this on here? Literally, it's a listing, I'll double check it when I get to the office and I can send it out. I don't know if there's any other free cash ones, the school's had a couple, but I don't think
Yeah,
any of them
schools
were
are both already.
appropriations.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna do that already, so, yeah.
Yeah, school IT, I think that might be it. I
All
don't
the
think
Medicare, Medicaid, that one.
Yeah.
The schools have a list of things.
Yeah.
They have like $1.25 million,
Yep.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
you know, of
And
requests.
special ed.
So there's the special ed
Special ed is a big
stabilization
one.
and then the Medicare.
Yep,
Yeah.
Medicaid.
yeah.
But I don't
Okay.
think there's anything else. You know, it is, what is it, March 18th, March 19th, so I say that and tomorrow morning somebody will come in and say, hey, we need $2 million to do something.
And we have to keep in mind that there will be a capital stuff in the fall, we need to have, basically reserve free cash for.
The memo I'll put together will talk about a couple of the larger projects and just how we're probably gonna handle them over the next year or two.
And again, our feeling is if you do put money into a capital reserve fund, it isn't money that's gonna be taking out next fall to pay for capital. You know, it's more of a long-term type of fund.
When we wanna get that new
Although-
garage down at the Lacey Fire Station, new building.
Yeah, listen, shh, that thing is, it's a disaster, it's gonna last us another 30 years,
It's
so.
been a disaster since it got built.
That's why we're fighting to make sure the middle school gets built well.
All right, so action items and follow-up. I don't think I have anything, I think we gave them all to Tony.
We did.
So-
Just do all this
He
next
comes
year.
to a meeting and we give him action items.
Yeah.
We won't see him again for another year.
You're right. All
right, so Tony's gonna get us, some thoughts on the free cash numbers and stuff like that by Thursday, and a draft of the town meeting warrant, just so you can see what's coming at us. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Alan, seconded by Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.